Well, it's been probably too long coming to get Mr. Shaun Newman back on the podcast. We've done 2 episodes before, and they've both been 2 of my favorite episodes. It's not often you get to talk to someone that is so, different guys, different shows, but the path that we're on is similar enough that we can have a certain conversation that I haven't yet been able to have with anybody else, and it's always fun. So I'm appreciative of you coming swinging by, driving out to this humble abode here to sit down and do some bullshit.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you you having me out. It seems like every time we do one of these, it's in a different spot. But I don't know. It's always fun to sit down with you, and like I say, with the Oilers playoffs and everything else going on, I'm interested to see where this conversation goes.
How about now? Oh, beautiful. Yeah, this XLR cable is getting a little wonky on me, but we're back. Yeah, that was something that I thought of too, with us both being such big Oiler fans, and I just started an Oilers podcast, and it'd be one of those things that is probably going to come up. But then I re-listened to our last episode. We did the second one this morning while I ran, and I just had so much to talk about. I was thinking, man, I think we're going to have so much shit we might not even get to the Oilers today.
Well, I tell you what, you take it where you want it.
So
as you know, I'm pretty much an open book.
Yeah, and you'll go wherever we want to go, which is one of the funnest things about talking to you. But just a couple big things I think we should jump into right off the start, just so I'm famous for having these big topics I want to talk about. We get into so many rabbit holes that we miss them at the end, and we're just kind of chucking them in. But let's start with bike for breakfast, because last time we chatted, you were just in the initial planning phase. I don't even think you'd announced kind of the actual intricate details of it until kind of around that time that we sat down. So since then, I've talked to Kenny Rutherford, a mutual friend of ours these days, which feels pretty good to say because he's a pretty special guy, about the bike for breakfast and what it was to him. But I never got to get it from the horse's mouth from you, Shaun, and you were kind of the one that really was the engine behind it. So how did that all work out? Was it everything you dreamed it would be? Was it harder? Was it meeting expectations, blowing them away?
Anytime you have like an idea and you throw it out there, and you're like, yeah, this is an okay idea. Like, we're gonna bike to Tufnell, Saskatchewan to see Quick Dick McDick, right? And everyone's like, where's Tufnell and who is Quick Dick McDick? And it blew any idea of what I thought it could be kind of out of the water. We caught lightning in a bottle. It was in that time frame where everything had been locked down. We kind of had to go a little bit outside the borders of what was allowed, but people were so ready for it, and there was nothing to compete against. There was just nothing. And so, you went from like, maybe we can raise, like, I remember thinking, if we raise like $10,000, I'll be excited. Yeah. And Neki Jamal, a dentist in town who I've had on the podcast before, he's an interesting guy, was like, well, Wayside Dental is going to sponsor $25,000 right off the hop. Wow. We're gonna push this thing. I was like, oh,
and that raises the bar a little bit too.
Yeah, and within, maybe a week, we were at $75,000, and we haven't even put it on social media yet. Yeah, we hadn't stepped on a pedal. We hadn't done jack shit.
Hadn't even trained.
That's right. And so, like, by the end of it, it was close to $300,000 raised. Wow. In about a month of social media. Yeah. We started social media May 1st, and I think we biked like June 6th. By the time the bike's done, we're at $300,000, wow. Right? And it was really cool. I speak really highly of Lloyd all the time because our community's like, I don't know. I'm sure it exists other places. I'm sure Edmonton has its version.
Slave Lake.
Else. That's right, Slave Lake. Lloyd to me just is really special because I grew up there all my life, and when people get behind a cause, they get behind it, and like we just felt it. And the Bike for Breakfast initiative event was like wild. Like it exceeded my wildest dreams of what it could be.
Right, and just for people that are listening, you bike all the way to Tufnell, Saskatchewan and back. Did a quick podcast with Quick Dick McDick while you're there.
Lost all my video gear. Well, see, here's the thing. We biked 1,100 kilometers there and back, right? But we did it as a tag team. So we weren't, like, this is a bunch of amateurs. I'm the only guy who's rode across Canada, but that's like, what is that? Like 18 years ago now? Like, or 16 years ago? It's a long time. Like, it's not like I'm in tip-top form anymore. And it was after COVID, you know, in the middle of that. Nobody's doing anything. And so a group of 10 of us and eventually 11 of us took turns, rode with each other. You could ride as much or as little as you wanted almost, right? But 1,100 kilometers there and back. And when we got there, the bus broke down. That was the first big issue we had. We went through like a Hail Mary rainstorm in the middle of the night.
What did we lose? All right. Sorry about that.
No, this is interesting. You know, and it's the first time we've ever had somebody monitoring everything to see what's going on.
It's new to me too.
Yeah, no, it's super cool.
Yeah.
So like there was just a ton of things that went on through it, and it was difficult, and it was fun, and it really challenged you, and
Yeah.
It was a ton of fun.
Mm-hmm. Mohammed, is it playing out loud over there? On the TV. I think the remote for the TV is just back by the fridge there. You can go there and just throw that on mute. I could just hear it. I kept thinking it was you trying to tell us something that was going wrong, Mohammed. I could just hear voices. Is he talking to us?
Just me talking to you twice.
Exactly. I could hear it once and then getting the replay. So then you went in, blew your expectations out of the water. I'm curious about, did you meet any new people along the way within that community? Because you're already pretty tight-knit into that community. But usually when you go through an event like that, or not an event, but like a process of putting things together, you come into contact with all these new people that maybe you'd heard of, but you never really got to put rubber to road, and you come out of it with not only a bunch of money raised for a great cause, something you've overcame, something you got to do that was pretty cool, but then you come out of it with relationships going forward. Was there any people that you met that like you left through that process being really good friends that you didn't see going into it, that you'd even have that as a added benefit?
Yeah, so I always bring up Nicky Jamal, because he was he was the first guy I asked, right? We didn't know each other before. Imagine getting a call, Nick, and on the other end is me going, hey, Nick, I've been following you on social media. Obviously Nicky. I've been following you, so you want to meet up for a beer tonight? I got an idea. And he's like, yeah, sure. So he comes to the studio, and I pitch him this is this stupid idea. I want to do some good. And he's like, I'm in. Yeah. I'm like, but do you bike? And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, but you realize what I'm at? Yeah, I'm in. And then he's the first one to step up in $25,000.
Wow.
And I mean, it was really cool to see what people are capable of, even when pushed out of their element. Yeah. And you're right. There was 10 people that you became really close with. Where I sit today, it's interesting though. I'm not a part of Bike for Breakfast this year. I've taken a step back, and it was a difference. Well, I don't know. It's a very difficult situation to talk about. I would say a difference in opinions on a couple things, and I just decided to remove myself. I was just like, I want to see it do well, and if that means I'm a part of it or not, that's fine. So it's interesting, because that's how long ago we talked. I hadn't even done it yet, and then we did it.
And so much has changed since then.
That's right. Yeah. It's crazy. That's the world today.
Yeah. I want to ask you some questions about that, but they might be kind of tough things to talk about. I know you say you're an open book, but and once again, I always give you anything we do touch upon, we can always cut it out after if you don't want to. But before I get into that, I don't know if we've mentioned what the cause was initially and like where that money went to. And that was one of my favorite parts of the story. So maybe you could just touch on that, and then I'll get into maybe some of the tougher stuff.
So it started off with raising money for schools. And then it grew to encompass, I think it was a 57-kilometer radius of Lloyd. Because if you know where Lloyd is, it's in the middle of nowhere. And so it's not just Lloyd, it's all these small communities that make up Lloyd as well.
And that's what makes that community that you spoke about at the start of what's so special in that area is all the surrounding areas too. It's not just the town of Lloydminster, it's everything that comes into that's the people that build that lattice work that you're so proud of.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal people and phenomenal little communities. So I think there was it's either 33 or 35 schools we ended up raising money for. Wow. And the money went into essentially breakfast programs. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, essentially give them money and allow them to support some of the needs that the schools were seeing. Because, like back then, a year ago, funding was being cut. You had people unemployed. You had, kids... You're hearing stories about kids not coming to school with any lunch or anything like that. And schools are prepared for a certain amount. Yeah. We wanted to make sure that they didn't have any worries. Like if a kid doesn't have any food, give them food, right? Like we got to take care of our own. And so that was very much the idea. And instead of just Lloyd, me and Ken are two small town Saskatchewan boys from outside of Lloyd. We're like, well, we got to take care of them too, because they're just as much as this, as Lloyd, the actual city. So
that's awesome. Love to hear it. And then, so going off of that kind of idea of since we spoke last, and since we spoke last, it was kind of an interesting transition because I remember this feeling, but then re-listening to it, it really came back was at that time when we spoke, you were not super into the whole idea of pushing back on the COVID stuff. I know you had strong feelings because when we talk off the podcast, you definitely knew your stuff, and you knew a lot more than you let on vocally on your show and stuff about some of the things that you were disagreeing with. But your idea at that time was kind of, I just don't know, it's not my place. I'm not that expert. And I, meanwhile, was going full steam ahead. That's just always who I am. Every time I saw an injustice, I was bleating at I was getting YouTube strikes way before that, right? Like at that point. And I remember going into it saying, like, I would never think of anybody differently for not doing because I got to see the pain of being that person and going out there and having, family and friends look at you differently in a way. So I didn't begrudge you it at all, but I just found it interesting because when we talk offside, and then I would say not long after that, you kind of flipped 180 and you went really hard into it, and it became kind of
Dr. Roger Hodgkinson.
Yes.
Hodgkinson pinned me against the wall, not literally, like just like figuratively.
Verbally.
Where I was trying to, and he says it, you're trying to dance. Mm-hmm. You can't dance this.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to speak directly at it. It was a good wake up call.
Right.
Because I just wanted to be I still want it to be a family-friendly show that everybody tunes in, and it's like, but we're in a strange place in the world. Mm-hmm. So it was, it was an interesting time. Like once again, so many things have changed. You talk about Bike for Breakfast. Well, I was the guy you're talking about, and then fast forward a bit, and I'm the guy sitting in Ottawa, right? Like that's how far it came.
Yes, and that's kind of, I want to get to all that because I think there's also parts that I don't know, and I think that's also just been me getting so busy I haven't been listening to the podcast as much, and apologies for overtreading things maybe you've already covered, but it's always good for people that maybe don't know you from a hole in the wall.
I was thinking about this today on the drive up. If I got Jordan Peterson, throw this out to the world again. I'm like, I had 2 goals for this year. 1, go full time, check. 2, get Jordan Peterson, working on it. Working on it. And if he comes on, like everybody should know who Jordan Peterson is, except there's going to be people on my show that listen that have never heard of him. Yeah. So it behooves me to get him to tell his story, which may feel repetitive to him. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be people that want to hear his story that have never heard it before, never read his books before, never, gone down that rabbit hole, even though I have. So don't feel bad about rehashing things. Right. There's lots that I haven't talked about because I'm still thinking on it and working on it. And if I don't want to talk about it, it's like any guest. I don't have to talk about anything.
Exactly.
So fire away.
Yeah. So you started, you had, I can't remember, you just said his name 15 seconds ago and I already forgot, but he kind of pinned you against the wall.
Dr. Roger Hodgkinson. Yeah.
And then you had a bunch of really awesome guests on after that, Peter McCullough, a couple of these guys. And that was, for me, as just a observer watching, it was like, I had been following these guys for months and months at this time and listened to lots of stuff and listened to them on other podcasts, Dark Horse podcast, which I think I might have put you on to.
Brett Weinstein.
Really early on in the stuff, even before all of this, like we had some conversations there, and you could see you become more and more educated through those conversations, which I think is really powerful with what this medium is people get to watch you in real time, educate your position on this and change and morph and take in these ideas, and not all of them. It's not like you're just, completely there with your jaw open, letting them shovel whatever it in. You were parsing that out. You were pushing back. You were taking what really struck you as true and what they could back up, asking your questions, and then going into the next conversation with more of that. And you could see it become more of a passion, become more of a thing that was at the top of your list, maybe, where before it was one of those things where you thought, I don't know if this is for me. Was it just those conversations that pulled you into it? Was that something you always wanted to do, but you just didn't know if that was the right call for you and your family? Like, I'm curious how that came to be, because it was it wasn't shocking to me because of the conversations we had on the pod, but I imagine for people that were just following along and didn't have any interaction with you, it would seem like it was a very
180 switch.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm trying to do with the podcast, I'm not perfect at it yet, is bringing the backdoor conversation onto the podcast. Yeah. What does Shaun care about right now? He should be talking about. Yeah. That's why the Oilers Flames, or now the Oilers Colorado Avalanche, Oilers Kings, just the playoffs in general. Our population has needed this for 2 years now. And I think it really, once again, is in interest of a lot of people that you talk about it, because that's what people want to hear about. yeah, it doesn't mean there isn't problems going on in the world. There certainly is. So you go back to, let me finish that. It doesn't mean there isn't problems in the world, but you can still have some fun along the way. And I think it's a balance. So if you go back, I think what I'd really implore to any listener who ever listened to the podcast, your podcast listeners right now, is one of the switches nobody could have witnessed except for myself. And the switch was, I'd been told the numbers on Alberta Health website so many times, but until you actually go there and start working it out for yourself, you can't really have a change. Like, you can't really change your mindset. So that's why I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe. That person might be, oh, that's an interesting thought. And it kind of makes you a little bit on both sides of the fence. That's kind of what I wanted to be. And then you go start like delving into the numbers and you start following along. And then, you know what, instead of just canned numbers, let's go take a look at, I did Sweden, I did South Dakota, North Dakota, Texas. I just went into a deep dive of it myself. Nobody there around, just me. And by the time I was done, I was like, okay, it's time to like really start going after this.
Be vocal about it. Yeah.
And so that's where the change happened.
That's where the change happened, right.
As much as Peter McCullough and them guys talked, really, at times I was like, oh man, I don't know if I trust everything out of everyone's mouth.
And at that point, it's hard to trust anything you hear.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about COVID in particular is all the numbers are out there. You just literally have to go to the website and look at it and then maybe break it down into your own sense. And so that was a big change for me. As for, like anytime you start into controversy, whether you have kids or not, to have people, I'm a people person.
Yeah.
To have people not want to come talk to you when you walk in a room, to have people, one of the things I've never talked about is the Health Foundation live stream. And it's not because I have any ill will to them, and maybe they made the right choice, but I helped build up in Lloyd something from nothing to a 12-hour live stream that ended up raising them the year that I wasn't there $500,000. It went from $50,000, and then our second year we did $325,000, and then the next year they did $550,000. And they pulled me off of it because of my views. And I was like, and that's right along the time I'm getting censored on YouTube and things like that. And it's just like, that's the stuff you can't plan for. People can tell you about it, but until you feel that, that's... Man, I don't know. You felt it like that.
I know exactly.
How do you explain it to people?
Yeah.
You think you're prepared for it, and then you get yanked from YouTube,
or yanked from your family Thanksgiving or something, right?
And
you get it, and it's not even they have any ill will because you. At least for me, someone who died so deep into the numbers right off the start, I was a numbers guy. I was looking all the numbers everywhere right from jump. That was because I just don't trust anybody. When anything tells me, I want to look at it myself, right? And to watch that and to have so many resources for independent voices that I'd already built up for years before, because I was already so down this rabbit hole of independent media, independent voices of people that weren't tied to any sort of, financial, they're not getting sponsored by these people that, all the things that keep people from speaking freely, right? That don't have that. I was in this place where right from the start, you see so many people go through this transition where they're good people. I'm a good Canadian. I want to follow the rules, and they get pushed and pushed and pushed, and more things don't make sense until it cracks and it breaks, and then they flip over, right? And then they get to that point, and they either get frustrated because they think, how could I have been so blind for so long? Sometimes they want to blame, but I was in a unique position where I was calling bullshit right from the start from both sides. The people that are saying this isn't a real disease, because I was listening to Brett and Heather Weinstein right from the start, and they were one of the. It's so funny to see them painted with this like anti-vax, anti-COVID, because they were the people in full jumpsuits, wiping their door offs, right? Like they were going so much farther than anybody else was doing in the world, and that's where I was getting my information at the start, because there was unknowns. But then as more data came out, you got to change your position with what was the best medical understanding from people that aren't tied to these games and theater and politics that have so much that go into it, right? You just said they don't care about any of that. They just care about what is the best health outcomes. And then they said, okay, we'll get outside, do all these things, and you're following those. But where I'm going with all this is I got to watch the media. It's tough to call it propaganda, but it was this propaganda push at people on both sides. And I had so much compassion, right? Like I felt awful when I got kicked out of the family Thanksgiving or whatever. It might have been Easter. I don't really know. I don't really care all that much, but I wasn't mad at anybody I found because I felt bad because I got to see exactly what they were fire hosed with, the fear, all these things. And I just felt so bad for them that they were put into that place. And then, you know, like it just almost made me sad. Like there was no point where any of the things I was feeling did I ever look on people, like the specific people in those situations when it sure feels bad when somebody doesn't want to come talk to you or someone. Me and you have both been through, we could probably sit here for the next 3 hours and just give example after example of where having these views has kind of sucked along the way. But at no point did I ever feel any sort of ill will towards those people because it was so clear to me of watching some of the most intelligent, loving people I know doing exactly what they thought was right and not realizing the pain that they're causing and the factors that they're missing. You know what I mean? Like that was what was interesting to me. And it just felt like the whole time, more and more of this is going to come out and there's going to be time where everyone comes back together. And I think that's what makes me sad too, is to see that how those fractures that should have been temporary fractures and we should have come together again, that it's become more permanent. And now those people that, like you say, there's no ill will towards them. I can completely wrap my head around how they would get to that spot where they were acting in those ways that we see as hurtful, they don't see as hurtful, and I wouldn't put any ill will towards that. But to then not be able to get over it and for that to be still the fact that we still, I can't step onto a plane right now. Like, where there's no scientific backing, there's not one shred of evidence that says that if I got that shot, I would be any more protection than anybody else. It's completely risk on myself, and that's a risk assessment I've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast of why I made that personal decision, but it has nothing to do with anybody else, but due to politics and these theater games and this divisiveness that prevents these conversations from happening, like we both tried to have. You see the results and you see the suffering that imparts from nothing more than just people refusing to come to the table and have those conversations. That part was painful to me. And then to watch a friend go through it was also painful because I know specifically exactly what you're feeling like that. And I'd already been in the battle, and I remember going through this of like, oh, Shaun's on the tee, you know, Shaun's going at it. And I was so excited for a bit. And then I see you start to feel the pain of it. And then I was like, ooh, like shit, that sucks. Like it sucks to see a friend go through that pain and then to watch it. And then I kind of lost track because you got further and further, had more guests, and then you ended up in Ottawa. And we hadn't talked for a lot of, I was planning a trip. As soon as the Ottawa kicked off, I had, you know, secretly snuck over the border because I wasn't supposed to at that point, right? Broke my rules and went on a road trip around America for a month, which was
healthy.
I can't even begin to tell you, Shaun, what that felt like to be treated like a criminal, like a terrorist, like a misogynist, like a racist, like all those other things they labeled me with just for having very similar opinions to yours, right? Like, and then to go to a country where everyone was so happy to see you and they were so proud of what was happening in Ottawa. Every American you talked to when you said you're from Canada, like I get chills just thinking about it. They were so proud of what was happening. And I got to see, you know, I was proud of you. You were there. You were doing it. And then I just saw you made some sort of cryptic post about what had happened. I wanted to reach out to you, but I just figured you had so much going on. I didn't want to push. I didn't want you to feel like you had to explain things to me, but I was so curious about what had happened there, what went down, and then that you just kind of went radio silence for
2 months.
2 months after that. And I was thinking, what could have happened? What kind of things went through your head? And that's where I'm curious. And mea culpa, I haven't been following the podcast as much.
Haven't talked about it.
Right? Haven't talked about it.
No.
Are you willing to talk about that now? And of course, stop me wherever, and we can get as deep or as shallow into it as you want. But I'm just curious, maybe before we get to that, the lead up to going to Ottawa of these podcasts wrapping up, you being more upfront about where your views and where you fall on it and where your line in the sand was. I think that was something that came up a lot, was the line in the sand, and you became very vocal about that. And like, how early did you know, before you landed in Ottawa, how many days, weeks before did you know that you were going to go be a part of that? Maybe we'll start there, and then we can lead into kind of where I lost you and where my curiosity is.
So a lot of like what I do, I didn't know until probably 10 hours before I left. I'd never heard of the Convoy going out to Ottawa. Mm-hmm. I mean, it must have been a week before because I interviewed Chris Barber. Of course, you can still find the Chris Barber interview on Spotify or Apple or whatever, but that's what gets me yanked off YouTube.
Right.
And it was a harmless interview. Like he was pulled over on the side of the highway in the States somewhere and just talking about this like convoy and we're going to do this. But one of the things that caught a ton of traction on social media was he talked about where the money was going to go. Well, and how much money did they end up raising, right? Because any excess they were going to give to veterans. And, like at this point, I have no reason to doubt Chris. I've met him multiple times. He is a genuine human being from what I've seen. Could I be wrong? Yes. At this point, I'm pretty sure I could be bamboozled. I trust my gut. He seems like a true, genuine, good old Sasky boy, to be honest. He's larger than life. He's a big man. Yeah. So I gotten reached out to by a few listeners on whether I was going to go to Ottawa. And I just kind of laughed. I'm like, how am I going to go to Ottawa? Yeah. Like I'm working full time at this time. And quietly, I'd quit my job. So I was actually supposed to be done at the end of January. And they convinced me to stay on for 2 months part-time. So I was like working, but I was part-time. And as it started to pick up steam, and I interviewed 2 people on consecutive nights, because I'm like, I'm going to try and get a piece of this so that we're listening to it. No different than the Oilers in the playoff run. What you're doing, I think, is great because people are interested. They want to hear different thoughts on what's going on. And so when the Convoy went, I'm like, okay, I'm going to interview people as they go along. And I got the bug. Like the second interview, I'm like, I got to go see this. Like what they're talking about, I need to see with my own eyes because whether it was hope, whether it was whatever feeling I had, I needed to experience that because it had been a long 2 years. Everybody knows this. It doesn't matter what choice you made. The last 2 years have been horrific. Yeah. And so I sent off a text to a whole plethora of people, mainly my siblings, but a couple of friends. And my sister answered the bell. And so we hopped in a vehicle. I honestly, I can't remember what day of the week that was. Monday. Like, can you imagine calling your boss and saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to Ottawa today. I won't be back for a week. And he's like, well, I can't really fire you because, I mean, you literally told us you were quitting a month ago and we're extending it. He's like, okay, when are you back? And I'm like, oh, this day. Okay, click. Yeah. So I'm like, well, I didn't get canned. Yeah. Okay, so where we go? So we drove all through the night. And, it's interesting to see the sun out right now and be such nice days, but we hit like some sort of storm that first night, pulled over in the middle of Manitoba, small town, slept in the vehicle because it was just that bad. And then we're like, at some point we got to go again. So we drove all the way like that, like going through Winnipeg, trying to catch the Convoy was wild, like with weather, because they had already gone through. Yeah. And I can't imagine people standing out in that. Like it was like minus 30, wind going about 100K an hour. There was like 18 trucks, semi-units in the ditch on the perimeter highway of Winnipeg to get around it. It's a couple points where like, maybe we should just pull over. And we eventually catch them in Dryden. And my first thought was, if this isn't huge, I'm going to be supremely disappointed. Yeah. Because everything is saying this is huge, right? And we hit it at Dryden and we got stuck in traffic. But in Northern Ontario, you can't tell if you got 50 vehicles in front of you or 2,000. You just no idea. And so we pulled into Thunder Bay. I played hockey in Dryden, so we spent a little time with my billets and caught them up again in Thunder Bay. And so the first day out of Thunder Bay, you kind of got a feeling of what it was.
Start to feel the electricity.
But you still couldn't get a clear sense because it was just so scattered. Right. Coming into Sudbury that night, we saw half of it because after you leave Thunder Bay, the highway splits and there was a detour because it closed one highway down. So half the convoy went north and the other half came with us to Sudbury south. Yeah. And so when they rolled into Sudbury, it was like a rock concert. I've never, like, those are memories that'll stay with me until I'm in the ground. Because, like, it was just like, it was probably 9 at night. It had been a long day of driving. Plus, they closed the highway down. So it's 9 o'clock at night. People have been waiting there for hours because they hear it's coming in. They had a schedule set. It's going to be there for 6 p.m. Yeah. And then it doesn't show up till 9. Well, what do you do? Well, you wait. So there's people like kids, grandmas, our age, older, younger, you get the point, all lining the highway, all waiting. And then you could see them coming down the hill, and it was the nighttime, and we got ahead of them. And you could see him coming down kind of like a little bit of a snake, right? Yeah. Like almost, I think a 13th Warrior, if you know the Antonio Banderas movie.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Oh, man, that's a classic.
Oh, shit.
Anyways,
I know what I'm doing tonight.
It's like, imagine like a fire stream of torches coming down, except the headlights coming down this hill. And then they do a slow roll through it was Sault Ste. Marie, not Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie. And they're all like, like horns and everything. And people were losing their minds.
I bet.
In a good way, like in the best way. Yeah. But like I tried videoing it with my phone and it died. That's how cold it was. Like and that was like a 30-second video. And I was just sitting there, my hand was shaking. And I'm like, this is so cold. This is so cool. And then it died. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah. It was North Bay the next night though, where both convoys came back together. And I have no words to describe it. The road was like shaking because how many horns were going.
Wow.
Like, I don't know if that's 1,000 trucks. I don't know if that's 100 trucks. All I know is that like Sault Ste. Marie was a rock party. Like
that was
North
Woodstock.
Bay was Woodstock.
Yeah.
Like it was, people lining the fences. A guy in front of us stopped the traffic, hopped out, started playing his trumpet. Like everybody's just so happy.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and so the road there was just as much fun as Ottawa, maybe more surreal because I've never seen that many people. I've never seen, like, for Canada Day, we don't have that.
Yeah.
That was Canada Day. It was this pilgrimage from west to east where, was it 1,000 trucks? Was it 10,000 trucks? I don't know. It was a lot.
Yeah.
Like by the time you got there, you're like, holy crap, there is a lot here.
So just to wind it back just a bit, when you initially make that decision, kind of a snap decision, right? You call work and you put that text out to family and friends. Was that a call to, hey, does anybody feel this way and want to come join it? Or was there any part of that of kind of warning your family, like, hey, I'm going to go do this, just be prepared?
I was all like, does anybody want to come for a dumb road trip? Like, I want to get in a vehicle, drive 38 hours, 40 hours, do some interviews, and then come back, basically within a week. Like, I don't plan on staying there for 2 weeks. And that's what the text was.
So I think more of where my question was going was like, what was the hesitancy? Because I would imagine rolling into like the Ontario, when you're seeing it start to come together and you don't know what you're going to expect, right? You said you didn't know if it was going to be, ginormous or maybe it's a bit overblown. You don't really know what you're getting into. And I would imagine there would have to be some hesitancy because you're already feeling the pressure of holding those views from the interviews you're having, the response you're getting, being pulled off of things that you have nothing to do with this. And it's completely, I don't know, to me, unfair. And I have some strong feelings about this. I'm sure if we wanted to get into it, we could, but you've already felt that. Was there any trepidation going in? And was that changed once you got to see it? Was that the moment of, I did the right thing? Like when you started to see it come together, did that flash you back to any of the hesitancies, or was there no hesitancy in the first place where you knew this was the right thing and you just had that feeling rolling all the way in?
For the most part, I would say that I didn't have any, I wasn't worried about what people thought. I thought by that time, like, I've already done it.
Yeah, I've already
taken enough heat. Like, I've already stood. I was really excited for it. I really was curious about it. And you talk about people having, like, meeting people along the road and, like, having an instant bond. Yeah. That's what happened on the way to Ottawa. Because everybody knew, where are you heading? Ottawa. Oh, all right. Me too. Where are you from? Alberta. Oh, you've come a long way for this. Like, those were instant connections made on a highway where you don't know anybody. And like that was, I don't think I had any second thoughts about going once I was going. I definitely did receive some, as you know, I got the text line and I'm like, fire away at me. I'm not worried about it. And I definitely received some, people saying it was, fringe minority, stupid, you're an idiot. Yeah. And you're just like, well, whatever, right? Like, to me, those ones hurt. They always hurt. Like, that's the hardest. I don't want people to hate what I'm doing because I don't wish ill will on anyone. Exactly. But I think you got to stand up for your beliefs, and you got to be respectful of other people's beliefs, right? Yeah. You got to do it in a way that, that's democratic or a balance. So yeah. So then you're getting closer. You can start to feel the energy and you were excited about it before. And I think so many people will, myself included, will resonate with that, of just that moment of excitement, especially like just to make it about myself for a minute here, sure. which I'm wont to do, like I was so frustrated of being that guy from day one, from March of 2020, that was, to the best of my knowledge, finding the most reasoned position between the crazies on the left and the crazies on the right, saying this is made up, this isn't even a disease, or it's all some big cabal, New World Order bullshit. Not bullshit. I mean, I don't want to call either side of this bullshit, or you guys are crazy to even ask questions. Just listen to daddy, do it like completely. You're killing grandma. Yeah.
You're killing grandma. That whole side. For somebody that was so desperate and so sure, in my faith in humanity, because I do believe at the end, you know, I'm a big Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, love wins type of guy, right? I've just had that instilled in me, and that is so true to my core of who I am. I was so sure that this has to break. Everyone's going to come together and realize that they're just trying to polarize everyone so that they can push through. There's power in polarizing people, and everyone's just grabbing. And when you're not stuck on one of those camps, you can see it happen. I was thinking, there's got to be something that's going to break. And I just sat there for 2 years saying, okay, next month it's going to break. This is, okay, now this came out. Fine. Like, this is something I've known, but now it's starting to get some mainstream traction. This will break people. And it was so disappointing for so many years. And then this Ottawa thing happens, and it was just, I was so disappointed that I was kind of heading south when everyone was heading east, and I couldn't take part. But I was on, and at that point I was so broken. I was so, like, I needed that trip to the US. Like, people who listen to the podcast will know exactly where I was at that point, but I was at that point of 2 years of just rage against the machine, being that guy, and just seeing no tangible effort towards it. It just seemed like you're alone in a sea, and then to see that upswell and that thing that you always believed in, that there were people, that it's not a fringe minority, it is the majority of people feel this way. And to have that put center stage, like, it was unbelievable for me. And like, I was doing my own pilgrimage at that time, but that meant so much to me. And there's probably so many people around that are listening to this right now and can put themselves back to that time and feel that exact same feeling of, finally, this is something real. And to bring it back to where you were, so you're seeing that the Convoy comes back together. Are you interviewing people at this point, or did you only start the interviews once you're not the ones that you recorded? So I'm sure you're having conversations, but
every day I was recording. Yeah. Every day I was along the road up until I went black. I recorded every single day with different people along the Convoy. Mm-hmm. I really, you know, I could see what was being said in the media and some of the stuff I was receiving, and I just wanted to, you know, give a light into some of the stories of the people that were there and that type of thing. And I got to be honest, I never feel bad about that point in time and making it about yourself. I think that if I didn't go, I would have felt the same way as you. Like, to me, you didn't need to be there to understand what significance that meant, not only for Canada, but for the world, right?
Yeah. Like I said, all the Americans down there that were losing their minds, to a T, every person said from Canada, oh, we're so proud, especially when we got down to Texas. Then that was the real, you guys, I'm embarrassed of our country now. Like, you guys are doing the real thing. Like, it was, you're right, it wasn't just Canada, it was worldwide what happened there. And that's what makes it so, I'm sure we'll get into it, but the way the media covered it, and I think maybe once we get into Ottawa, you can really shine a light on the disparity of what was covered and what was actually happening there. But as much as they tried to besmirch it and really paint it in a way, the truth rang through to those that were listening for it.
Well, I mean, everybody's got a camera, right? Like, I mean, you don't need a pod. Like, I mean, sure, having people there you trust, 100%, but like, the phones did not lie. When there's 1,000 of them showing videos from what's going on in the streets of Ottawa, they were trying, and I don't know who they are, but I mean, like, media was trying to paint it a certain way, which was despicable in my mind. Like, it was horrendous. Yeah. Because all they had to do, you know, and they hid behind, we were fearful for what the protesters will do. Well, I don't know. I was down there and I saw what was going on. Like, there was, I mean, the first night when they talked about don't go out past, it was like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and there was SWAT down there, and they were talking about Antifa and riots, and like, man, I had a partial meltdown because I'm just like, what have I got myself into? You know? Yeah. And then nothing happened. And then the next night I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't go out. And one of the ladies there was like, oh no, you should go. It's totally fine. And I went out, and there was, you know, like the picturesque family of like a mom, a dad, and like a 10, an 8, and a 6-year-old handing out candy bags to anyone on the street. Like, that's what was going on at like 9 o'clock at night. So there was no, like, was there danger? Oh, there's danger everywhere. Yeah. Was it this despicable place? No. And I would say after like day 2 or 3, the truckers had organized themselves so well that like at 2 a.m, you could walk downtown, and the truckers were all patrolling because they were worried about all these different things happening from Antifa or from whoever. Yeah. And so they were up all night, like not in shifts, right? So like you could walk anywhere down there, and it was safer than anywhere I've been on this planet, to be honestly quite frank.
It was the way the effort to paint it in a light that it wasn't spurred on people to make it what the world you'd want it to be. If there wasn't something edgy, like, you would want everyone to be looking out for each other in that way, so you could walk like Edmonton. I wish there was that in Edmonton right now. So you can walk around, after an Oilers game Saturday night, game 3 against Colorado, you don't even get that, right? So that's what I love. That's the beauty of it. They tried so hard to make it this dangerous place that they ended up putting the parameters around it so that people could rise to the occasion and prove like what everyone would want it to be, which is, of all the ways, there's so many different ways that this was just poetic and how it all played out. But that was one of the ones that struck me the most, it was them shooting themselves in the foot the whole time. The message they were trying to do, they absolutely accomplished, which is so parallel to every goddamn restriction, every shutting down, every lockdown, every mandate was exactly them trying so hard to force a reality, and for reality come smack them in the face and to do the exact opposite of what they thought it was going to do. Was their plan and their playbook all the way along, and then they kept it going to this point where, okay, they can't just throw the same playbook. It's so clearly not what they're painting it as, but they just took that as a sign of, okay, we just need to now we put away the paintbrushes, now we bring out the paint gun, and we're just going to spray it with propaganda of like, this is up, and then everyone rose to that occasion and showed exactly the idiocy of them trying that playbook once again when it so clearly failed. And the response of what they were seeing was a response to their failure. And then they tried to double down on that again, instead of saying, hey, this is a pretty big response. This is an infringement, or maybe we got some of this wrong. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. We don't need to, admit that they should, and you'd hope you could, but this is very hard. Humanity has a problem with admitting wrong, but
especially government.
Especially government. I think government is the, amalgamation and it's a microcosm, which again, I hate using that word because I use it so much in the first 40 episodes of the podcast that everyone bugs me about it, but it's such a good word. It was like, government is a microcosm of human nature. And every person has that in themselves, right? Of the ability to be corrupted by power, to not want to admit their wrongs, to do all those things. But when you get to a point in government where all the accountability structures are absolutely stripped away and there's nobody really calling you on your shit, you get the worst parts of human nature coming out in government. And I think that was what COVID showed more than anything, was that exact thing. So then it makes complete sense for me of what the reaction was the worst parts of human nature that was personified by the government in that actor. And then you have the people, which were the Convoy was the best parts of human nature, of fighting back against that, of everything, just humanity as humans, of evolution, of what we've fought to get over, of these basic human nature letting us rile, of just, fucking and fighting when we want, and just that caveman shit. And we've come above that. And they were trying so hard to hold that they were that position and that high horse that they were on. And they forced these people that they'd painted with all these brushes to really show the best of humanity. And exactly, patrolling the streets, shoveling for people, handing out candy bags, making sure people had food and toilet paper. It just was so beautiful to me. And it saddens me to know that there's probably a very large portion of Canada and maybe the world from the media coverage that didn't get to see that were just so ready to take what they wanted to see out of it, that they're racist. Oh, I see one flag there, and now I've painted these tens of thousands of people with the same brush because of one image, and that just replays on the news. And that was kind of sad. It's sad and beautiful, just like so many things in life. It's sad and beautiful at the same time. But I imagine if I got a dose of that from watching from thousands and thousands of kilometers away, you were right in that. Like, how was that disparity? Was that hard to even keep your head on straight when you're seeing on media them just completely painting it one way and everything you're seeing in reality is the polar opposite? Was that even hard to It
was hard to put together.
Handle that distance? I'd imagine your brain just being pulled apart.
I don't know. I grew up loving the CBC, right?
Yeah.
Sunday night movies and Hockey Night in Canada. Mm-hmm. And, I interviewed Judy Reeves. It was one of my favorite interviews I did back in the day, and that was the lady who survived the perfect storm. And she talked about listening to the CBC kept her alive. And, it's got a proud history in our country, I think. But it was on full display of how, whatever word you want, I really don't give a shit. They didn't do any journalism at all. Not at all.
Anti-journalism.
That's right. Yeah. And so to me, I have no problem calling that watching it, I use the cops as an example. The first day we were there, I was trying to talk to a cop, and arms crossed, and they got their balaclavas on, so you can only see their eyes, and you get a feel that they're very standoffish. Mm-hmm. And every night they'd go home, and I guarantee it, I'm not saying all of them did it, but there'd be one that turns on the news to see what they're saying. And then he'd go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then they come back and they talk about it with their group. You could see it like, and then day 2 now they're not crossing their arms. And a couple of them have the balaclavas pulled down a bit.
Yeah.
By day 3, they're smiling. And by day 4, they're taking pictures and high-fiving. And then what would happen is they'd take that group and they move them out and bring in a new group. And it'd start all over again.
Yeah.
Arms crossed, blah, 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 blah. You get it. Because if all you did was watch the news, you would think you were coming down to a brawl. And it's going to be, and you get down there and you're like this is, and believe me, I tried my best to go to the places, and I don't know if this is a great thing to admit, but I tried to put myself into places that I thought would be dangerous. Yeah. Like walk around at 1 a.m. and just see what happens. Yeah. Because after the first day, I was so terrified of being there. I just kind of admitted to myself, okay, let's get over that. Let's go see. And like, I walked by cops, groups of them at, I don't know, maybe 11 at night thinking like, well, hopefully this doesn't go wrong. Right. Yeah. And sat and talked to them. They're all great people. Like, we had so much fear instilled into us about everyone, that everyone's Antifa or the cops are bad and they're all hired and this and that and everything, that it just like, it seeped into my mind. And then you watch the news and you see it and you're like, what is going on here? So I just stopped. I just turned it all off. And I started like experiencing it and like living where your feet are, to still, go back to Ray Ferraro when he was on the podcast. Like it was a thing of beauty. Yeah. And like, I wish everybody could have flown there to experience what was happening there, because it's just, honestly, I don't know. I'm not a huge, faith believer. Like, I grew up in the church, but I don't know. I can just simply say I don't know. But like, you hear about other cultures doing pilgrimages, and I understand that from the Ottawa journey, because that's what it was. It was a giant pilgrimage, and when you got to the end, you were all had done your own pilgrimage, and that amount of emotion. You can like taste it, like you can like feel it. It's like in the air. It is. I don't know how to explain it better than that. It's just like, like there was people weeping in the streets. I don't know how many times I cried, but I cried a lot. Yeah. But everybody cried a lot. Yeah. People were high-fiving, hugging, just being so friendly, no mask, but polite about it. I tell the bathroom story, like, I need a bathroom. They had no bathrooms on the Parliament Hill. Yeah. So, I don't want to pee on Parliament Hill. I mean, by that time, they were already talking about us defecating on Terry Fox and the Warm Line and all this fucking shit. And so I'm like holding my pee. So, I walk up to 2 cops and they're like, oh, well, McDonald's has one. I'm like, okay. So I walk over to McDonald's. They say, you can't come in without a mask. I'm like, all right. So I turn around, go back to the cops. I'm sure the cops were like floored that I'd come back and ask for a mask. I'm like, I just want to go pee. I don't really care that they want me to wear a mask. I just want to go pee. So they give me a mask. Yeah. Kind of looking at me like, what is going on right now? Because by now, everyone's breaking the rules, right? Yeah. Nobody's doing anything except for McDonald's. So I put my mask on, go back in, and now she's like, oh, the washrooms are closed to the entire public. We're not allowing anybody in. So then I go back to the cops, and they're like, oh, did you get your pee? And I'm like, no. And like, they've closed the bathrooms down. Yeah. The cops are like, well, just pee on the ground, man. We don't care. I'm like, I'm a human being. I'm going to go use a bathroom. Tell me where another bathroom is, or go tell McDonald's to open it up and let people go to the bathroom. Like, there's nowhere to go down here, right? It's just, I don't know. It's one of those experiences that I'm going to think on for a very long time, because there's just so many different aspects of it that some of it I can understand. Some of it you just can't even begin to like unravel. Yeah.
And that's, I think, something that all the way along is a feeling that I've had, and I'm sure so many people have had of, and this is what sucks, is that thing we talked about earlier, this divisiveness, this planned divisiveness of trying to push people apart, which prevents these conversations from happening. Because when the conversations happen, all these things that make no sense start to make a little bit more sense. Yes. Which is something that was tough, because when I would never expect anybody to do the work that I did and get down the rabbit hole and listen to, like, who is going to listen to 20 hours a week of podcasts on this type of shit? Not a lot of people.
More than you think. But, more than you think. But agreed.
But I think I'm an exception, right? Like, sure. Okay, who listens to 60 to 80 hours of podcasts in a week. Like I listen to on multiple speeds, so it's not actually crazy, but that is what I do. And that's what I love. So this wasn't a big imposition on my life to do this. This was something I'm passionate about and something I want to learn. And I have my favorite medium of all time that I, couldn't have dreamt up in my wildest dreams of how I like to take in content. They have it in that with these people that I've already had years of building up trust with, so enough that not that you trust them implicitly, but now you know where their blind spots are a bit, where they have a genuine passion for this, and they're going to be more likely to believe that, right? Like all these things. So all these things are making a lot of sense to me. And then when you try and have these conversations with people, and that's the biggest sentiment I got of, this just doesn't make sense. Like I want to be a good person, I want to follow these rules, but they just don't make sense. And it's like, man, it shouldn't make sense with the information you have, with the inputs you've been given. There's no way for you to make sense of this. There's no other outcome than confusion. But that is a sign to you that you haven't been getting the inputs. And that's where I try to say I try not to get frustrated with people and have compassion for everyone on each side of this, because I see how they get there. But that is so clear to me that if you get to that point where you've done everything you can with the information you've been giving and nothing makes sense, maybe there's some information going. And then you see that there's this active campaign against a whole litany of people with a whole litany of different ideas that want to bring more inputs to the table. Doesn't mean you have to believe
them. And they're
them.
not even being allowed to put it on the table.
Not even allowed to be put on the table, right? And that doesn't mean that, and everyone's fear and argument against this is that if you let them put it on the table, then they're going to push forward their agenda of all this other crazy shit. It's like, no, you don't need to take everything. Just like when, the CBC is pushing out, propaganda about that, you don't need to take all that in. And if you did, clearly from your experience, you'd be more ignorant of the reality than you would be had you not taken it in, right? So now you have you're not even getting the information from here. You are clearly been shown
when you have that feeling in your stomach, like something doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That to me is a sign that I just need to read more, or I need to go explore some things and just try and get educated as much as I can on a situation. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of people in COVID, that's what they did. And once they did, then they found things and they're like, this makes no sense. Yeah. And then they start seeing people censored. And once you start seeing part of the conversation being wiped off, you're like, that holds more value than what everybody else is seeing, because they're not even being challenged anymore, and they're not allowing them to challenge them. Right. Like, and so to me, that feeling in the gut like a year and a half ago, when you're like, this just doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. Was a feeling I could have easily tried to wipe away and just been like, no, it's fine. Instead, I started picking at that, and the more you picked, then you realized it was a ball of yarn, and it was gonna unravel, and you kept pulling and pulling, and it led to Ottawa, right? Yeah. Like that's what it did to me. Yeah, was it kept me going down this. I never wanted to get so focused on the podcast on one thing. Mm-hmm. I love talking about everything, but for society, for 2 years, that's what it became. Mm-hmm. It became that. Yeah. And if we're not going to get over this one thing, then I have to talk about it. Yeah. And that's what it became. Which is funny to think of. I'm going to make this point for you and for Kenny, because when we talk outside of the podcast, we talk about all these. We talk about oil. We talk about philosophy, Jordan Peter, like all these really deep topics. But so much of the conversation, because it is such a big point, and the conversation is so suffocated, that we get on here. This is the conversation we're having. Yeah, it happens over and over and over again. And you try and stray away from it, but then you go, well, you can't fly, you can't drive. They just voted down in Parliament, like, what was it, 244 to 104, whatever the numbers were, that they're, Parliament basically said they're not going to lift travel restrictions. That just happened this week. They got the new gun law coming in. And I mean, in our part of the country, hunting and everything else, like that's a huge deal to a lot of people. It is. And so it's like, you want to get away from it. And then what does the government do? They don't do what you think, the gun law I'll put on the side, because I've never been a giant hunter, but I fully understand that. I grew up in Slave Lake, Alberta. Right. You got it all. I have some feelings, right? Like, yeah. But like when you come back to COVID after 2 years and you see how quickly mandates can go, like, I mean, they went quick when Ottawa happened. Mm-hmm. And for the federal government to still be holding on while they're getting made fun of, and pretty much on all the world stage is just making fun of us. The U.S. is pretty much back to normal. Britain's wide open. Like you start to go down this, you're like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know. But then I was, on the drive here, I was listening to NHL on the Fly or whatever it is on Sirius XM.
Yeah.
And this is the first week. What are we sitting at? We're sitting at June 1st. June 1st is the first time in Toronto they've been back into the studio.
Wow.
And you go...
And you look around the world at everyone...
Like, think about that. Yeah. Like, that. All you can do is kind of laugh at that. It's like, but that's in our country.
Right.
And you're like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
Yeah. And another piece of this, and I want to dump back into Ottawa and the other stuff, but like one of the biggest things I was the most vocal about this whole time was that we're having a whole other side of this this conversation be demonized and not allowed to be put out into the world. And one of the biggest pieces of that was the economics effect. I was huge on the my whole degree was economics. I've been obsessed with economics since I was a kid. I read Freakonomics at like 13 or 14, that book by, I can't remember the two names of the authors, but they're absolutely amazing. Come from the Chicago School of Economics. Stephen Levitt, yeah. Unbelievable. And they have a great podcast. So anybody's interested that wants these kind of weird economic stories that like really will put your brain in a pretzel, listen to the Freakonomics podcast. It's awesome. But I was saying, we do not know what we are in for with the, like, even if you have a basic understanding of markets with this kind of stimulus and this kind of shutdown, what we're in for and what we're feeling right now, where they're saying there's 7% inflation, inflation is one of the biggest things to me. That is so funny. And when you learn this first day of school, that inflation is complete garbage. It is the most inaccurate, like they get to pick a random bundle of goods that they get to decide what goods they're going to pick. And they get to weight those goods for how much weight they think they have impact on the family. So like they can weight fuel, this. So they get to make whatever they want that inflation number to be. They make that number because they get to pick the goods they measure and they get to weight the goods for what they want to do. It is the worst measure in the world. Inflation is, right? It's a real thing. And there is inflation, but they think inflation 7%. That is bullshit. It is so much higher than that. Everyone knows, anybody with half a brain can feel that. Anybody with a family and kids that are trying to put food on the table can feel that right now. And that was, now for everyone to say like, oh, it's this war in Ukraine and stuff. I was like, no. Like that, it sure doesn't help. But this was so...
It was coming no matter what.
It was coming no matter what. And there was really, brave people, not calling myself brave. I was just parroting brave people and seeing the writing on the wall from them as well as what I was feeling. But I was screaming about this so long, and now people are really hurting. Like, and we're just starting to see the beginning of it. And for them to, which is all fine. You make mistakes and you learn from them. But now when you take conversation off the table, so now we're not even learning from the mistakes, and we have completely gone off the deep end and people understanding of how we got into this. And now people are feeling this pain and they don't even understand how we got to this. So we're so ripe to make the same mistakes again, because they're not only are we refusing to learn from it, but we're actually enabled to, because the knowledge that you need to have to learn from it is being so gated off the table that you can't even have a discussion. And that is really worrying to me. And you'd think that there'd be revolt, there'd be people in the streets. Clearly Ottawa, you got to see, everyone thinks that's your last option when they get to that. And that's not even an option, which what we'll get to. It's frustrating to me, and it has been frustrating to me.
I wonder if this has been going on, like if for all of time this has been going on, right? And that's I don't know, people call it waking up or whatever, just to seeing it, because once you see it, it's hard to not see.
Exactly.
Right?
And then me and you are both big proponents of Dan Carlin, one of the most influential people in the world. We both have said this. I've heard you say it on your podcast multiple times. I've said you put that guy's content into schools and you would change the world, right? Like, it just someone to talk about history. But then when you talk about, this has been around from the start of time, who knows that pretty well? Dan fucking Carlin. And can show you examples from the Romans, from like medieval times in Europe, of how this exact thing and that idea of this is such a cliche, but history is written by the victors, right? Like,
well, I interviewed Kaylin Ford.
Kaylin Ford. I don't know if I know who that is.
She's a girl. You would enjoy Kaylin Ford. Yeah. She's a lady from Calgary who was running for the UCP in 2019, and essentially gets railroaded by media. And the reason I bring her up is, here she is sitting in Calgary running for a Conservative Party, and I've voted Conservative for all my life pretty much, and I didn't even, like, it's just like I had the blinders on back then or whatever. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I do kind of remember that story, right? Like, they were calling her racist and all these different things.
You hear, and sadly you hear that so much that.
But you never. But I'm just taking my, like, I never do a deep dive into it because I've never really cared that much.
Exactly.
Right? And now that you start to care about where we're heading, then you start to see it all over the place. And if you don't call it out, then it gets to pass. And here's this woman who's now suing like the NDP, the Toronto Star, like all these huge hitters for like $7 million because she talks about it. Like for close to 2 or 3 years, she couldn't find a job because nobody wanted to hire her because there's this extremist, blah, 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 blah. You get the point. And you're like, oh, right? And so, like, I don't know. It's just I'm no better than anyone else. I was probably as bad or worse than everyone else. I want to talk about the Edmonton Oilers and Calgary Flames. That's what I want to do. I want to go have beers on a Friday night and go back to work Monday and, you know, not think about these giant problems. But it's come, you know, it's kind of come to roost on us, so to speak, right? Like, it just feels like if we don't start talking about some of this, and, you know, and we have been now, you know, for myself for a year, for yourself longer than that, I think, you know, like, can you believe Jason Kenney is stepping down? Like, that blew me away. In Saskatchewan, you got a new party forming, and, you know, in the Conservative Party, O'Toole steps down, right? Like, on the political scene, tons of things are changing, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with any of that.
Yeah. I have a little bit different take on that.
Oh.
I think it looks like things are changing and nothing has changed. If anything, it has more solidified into the same game because
you think in Alberta, Jason Kenney stepping down is the same game?
Nothing changed. It's a sleight of hand trick. They want you to concentrate on the names and the people, and this is what's going to be the difference. But it's so broken, so much deeper than that. That's the top of the pyramid, the face on it. But the actual crumbling foundations of it, and this is what was so frustrating me throughout all this COVID stuff. All my friends from university, every single one, just blamed Jason Kenney for everything, and then everybody else, all my friends from, they all blamed Justin Trudeau for everything. And you go, these are the exact same people that are funded by the exact same people that don't care about nothing but keeping you from realizing that none of them have your interests at heart. They're all greasy politicians, and it's so hard as someone that grew up. I was blue as could be, and I've in the last couple of years woke up to this fact that it is completely a shell game. There's nothing changing about anything. Now, the next guy is,
I hope. Well, I tell you what, we can revisit this part of the conversation in, let's call it like 3/4 of a year, because they're going to have a leadership race here. I don't know if they even announced when they're going to do it, September, October, whatever. Soon. You get the point. Yeah. And I have really high hopes for that, because I know a couple of the people that are going to be running for it, or at least around it. And if it comes once again in a year and we're both sitting here talking about this still, I'm going to be like, you know what, Nick, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I'm like, I never would have thought. I didn't place all the blame on Jason Kenney. There was some blame to be placed there for sure. Yeah. But the fact that he's stepping down, the fact that Alberta voted that, you know, what was it, 51%?
Yeah.
51%. The fact that happened gives me a little bit of faith that, and I'm not, once again, I don't know if the new person coming in is going to be better or worse than Jason Kenney, but change needed to happen after the 2 years we had. And so the fact there's change, I'm like, let's see.
And I see where you're coming from, but I think that is I think hearing you say that, they're going, yes, like that's exactly what we want them to think. Like, and I know this might seem, and this is probably shocking because I'm usually the hope and love guy, right? But I just think I have hope too. But I have hope that eventually enough of this is going to happen, and there's going to be a point where people realize this and realize that the whole system's going to be changing, that there's nothing within the system itself. Oh, let's get a new.
So you want to burn it down?
I don't want to burn it down, because that is.
How do you fix it without burning it down?
You have to capture it.
If you
capture it. So Brett Weinstein, one of my heroes, he realized this a long time ago. And Eric Weinstein, his brother, is one of the big people that has realized this. And I think we talked about, actually, the first time we talked, Shaun, when I had just stumbled, I don't know, something in the Instagram
back
algorithm.
When the algorithm would actually let me win every once in a while.
Yeah, I never even got to that point. I came so out of the gate on that. I was completely against the algorithm from the start. But yeah, something happened. Someone shared. I have friends in Lloyd, and you came up. And I thought, there's a guy from Lloydminster that has a podcast. Like, I reached out to you that night. I think we podcast like the next day, because I was just so excited to see somebody else doing that. And when that was happening, I was all about, and if you go back to my first podcast, you'll hear me talking about the Unity Project. Was exactly the solution to this problem we're talking about now. And you got to see what they did once they realized and cottoned on to what people were trying to do. They pulled up all the stops. So what the Unity Project was Brett Weinstein and a couple other really smart people realized this exact same thing on problem. And it was very apparent. To talk about it in the American realm is way easier to make this point, because it was coming up to the election. It was Trump versus Biden. And he was going, holy fuck, we got a senile person that like is so clearly out to lunch, and we have this kind of crazy motherfucker that, you know, is just so non-presidential, and all fill in the gaps with whatever things you want to say about Trump. There's a whole other story of, you know, like my position is that there's tons to criticize Trump on, and the things that got criticized in the media were they shot themselves in the foot by he would leave little trails of things for people to attack him on that were kind of half true, so that you could ignore all the actual shit that he did wrong. And I'm not a fan of either of them, but they realized this, you know, that's the point I was trying to make in Canada of it's a shit sandwich. It doesn't matter what face they put on it. The Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives, none of them have our best interest. They are completely captured. They're financially captured. They are completely at the teat of, you know, tech powers. BlackRock that owns all the tech powers and owns all of medical industry, owns Pfizer, owns all these people, owns all the media. They're so captured. There's nothing you can do, right? So he said, but then I think that is an easier leap to get to. But then the problem is when people hear that, they go to where you said, well, do you burn it down? And there's a lot of people that have that burn it down, and that scares me too. And I think that
scares the shit out of me.
And that is what gives those people so much power to push against those people, because they call them rad. They say, all these are the people who want to burn it down. That's kind of the Antifa side, right? Like they realize this too, not in the same way, but they want to burn it down. And that's what like the hardcore university communists, which I know very well, of like half of my friends from university are all caught in this cult of capitalism is broken, we need to burn it down. It's like, no, capitalism is broken for sure, but it is the best thing that's ever happened to humanity. It's the only reason we have freedoms. You go back before capitalism and it's absolute feudalism and slavery and
not good times.
Yeah, and people so are detached, they don't look at any history, so they don't realize, and they don't realize how amazing we have it. It doesn't mean burn it down. I swear I will tie this all back together. I'm getting out on some rabbit holes. But they realize this, and then he goes, there is no way we can have any change regardless which party wins. There's no sense in, you know, throwing your vote away at the Libertarian Party. People aren't excited about it. It's somewhat, they're trying to play the political game and make change from within, and that is not what's going to happen. They have it so guarded down, gated. They will never let those people get, which is, again, where I kind of want, that's my pushback to me and you both knowing some really interesting people that are trying to enter the political realm. And I'm so proud of it, and it just fills my heart with pride, but it's so gated. They will never let that succeed. They will never let them get to the point where they have the power to make the change, or they will let them move forward as much as they can while trying to corrupt them and trying to get them on them, get the financial powers. And a guy like Kenny Rutherford, who I'm just going to call it because he's the guy that gives me the most faith in anybody that enters the political realm, they're going to try and get him captured. And I don't think he has it in him. I don't think he will be. I think he is one of those people that are the rare people that could make a change. And if they were able to ascend to those heights where they could have the impact, they would make real change, and they will not let that happen. That's my theory, and we can have more discussion on that. But then backing up to this, so Brett realized we need to find these people that understand this problem. So he created a community, this Unity 2020. We are going to find a new way to go about it. And he came up with this idea of having two different people run, like you pick two people that could be the president. And they had all sorts of people like Jocko Willink, a couple of kind of renegade, half political people that understood this. He had a couple tenets. They had to be patriotic. They had to be brave. They had like a certain amount of thing of what real people want, not politicians that will say anything. And he wanted, they were going to do two votes with it. They were trying to build this community. And they'd do these called Unity Campfires, which are live on YouTube. And they would bring on really smart people, and they'd have this discussion about why the political system is broken, why it needs to change. And then they would talk about some of these candidates. And then within that group, and then you do votes. While they're doing the campfires, they would have votes about certain topics and things, and it would grow the community. And every time there'd be more people for the campfire, right? There's people that are part of this Unity project, and then they would do two votes, one for somebody kind of center right and one from center left. And then they would flip a coin for which one of them is going to run for president, which one's going to run for vice president. And then after 4 years, they'd switch, and the other person would go, right? The whole part of this is to capture it. And what they knew was if we started this too early, because that's what everyone's criticism, like, why are you starting this when we're 6 months out from, maybe it's 4 months out from the election? But they knew, shit, this needs to catch fire very quickly. Because if we start too early, they're going to shut this down. There's no way they're going to let this grow, right? The powers that be will never let this happen. But if we start too late, we won't have enough. And I think their big play was they were hoping to get enough groundswell that Joe Rogan would invite them on and they could talk about it, which unfortunately, by the time they did, they had already shut it down and completely kicked the legs out of it through the technology that they have and the tech powers. So they get to this point, and then their plan was to get enough groundswell where they could take over the Libertarian nomination with these two people that already have this huge swell, way more, because they were already getting more traction than any Libertarian actual party, and because it's coming from a different place. It's not just another political party. It was, let's find actual brave people that have the people's interests, that are brave enough to stand up to this whole organism that is designed to be captured, and just put the power in the hands of the people that have enough money to buy it. And we're going to take that out and actually put the people first again, which is what the government's supposed to be. So they started, it's growing, it's getting all its groundswell, it's getting to that point. And then what does Twitter do? They shut down their page. YouTube shuts them down. They said, they come up with some bullshit excuse of what they were doing, whether it's hate speech or their bots. They have all these different levers they can pull to shut them down. And yeah, the election went on as possible, and they completely had their legs chopped out. And it was exactly, I've never been so excited in that political realm as I was for those 6 weeks or whatever as this is growing, and I got to follow it all along, and I was so gung-ho for it, and so disappointed when you got to see the inevitable, where they come in, they axe it, they know, because that's the true thing they're scared of. They're not scared of anybody that wants to come in.
Joseph Bourgault.
Who's that?
Joseph Bourgault is the guy from St. Bruce, Saskatchewan. He helped fund part of the Freedom Convoy. He was in Ottawa. He's a business owner. He was running for leader of the Conservative Party here in Canada. Needed to have, $350,000 raised by donors, or maybe it was $300,000 plus 15%. I forget what the exact number was. They made $354, right? So they made the number. They need to have so many signatures. They made that. They made all these things.
They'll add rules. They will add things.
And he didn't get out on the debate.
Yep.
And you go, that's a hard one to swallow, because there's one that, I'm actually fascinated by what you're just talking about with Weinstein's and the Unity Project, because I'm like, I wasn't obviously paying attention back then, and now I'm starting to pay more attention. And the one in Saskatchewan, for federal conservative leadership, happened right in front of my eyes, right? Like, I literally interviewed Theo Fleury and Joseph Bourgault the day they hit the numbers, and they were excited. Like, they sat in the studio and were just over the moon. Yeah. And the next day it was announced that they weren't going to be allowed because they had failed to meet some undisclosed, and you're like, what? And I say this quite openly. Like, I like Joseph. I think he was a very long shot to win. In saying that, he was going to get on stage and say some things that people would have liked to have heard. Exactly. And that might have spurred him on bigger. And he had Theo Fleury pushing hard for him, and they were going to go in and
shake some shit up.
That's right. Shake the bush and see what came out of it. And honestly, I have no idea what would happen to that. But I had Roman Baber on, and I listen to what he's saying, and I feel like he's shaking the bush just as much as anyone, and he was allowed to. So I'm like, I don't know what to say, right?
Yeah, I just think you can see the concerted effort and what the, yeah.
That's the dangerous part of what's going on right now. And I learned this, you get talking about American politics, right? Like, I had Paul Shu on, the professor from college, and where I went, and he got talking about Bernie Sanders and how the Democratic Party just slowly phased him out so that he couldn't win. And you're like,
not even slowly phased him out, actively colluded to keep him out, and it's all proven, and nobody got upset about it. Not even Bernie, but that's the thing, because they're all in, and they all play this game. They know there's nobody at that level that gets the level you understand the game that's being played. And Bernie Sanders understood the game, but because he's so opposed to the burn it down, which I love and I respect him for that, but he doesn't want to start. Bernie Sanders very well after that could have gone on Joe Rogan's podcast and started a very big movement for the burn it. Look at this clear corruption, because they want their players in there, and this whole game is rigged.
I just argue, to me, that should scare everyone. Like, I'm all for, when you're playing a hockey game, you're going to try and control the outcome. But when the Democratic process, if people want Bernie Sanders to win the Democratic riding, isn't that the whole flipping point of politics? right?
It's what democracy should be, but it hasn't been that for
a long time,
80 years.
And the thing is now more and more people are starting to see it. And so when you bring up the Unity Project, to me, Joseph Borgo was
similar,
a very well and close to home.
Yeah.
I look at the Alberta politics, and I go, oh, man, it must be a long play then to go, Jason Kenney's on the way out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like, I'm trying to figure out if they, like, nowhere else in Canada did that happen. It's not like Scott Moe was getting ousted in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
He's not. And so you look at Alberta and I go, well, I don't think they planned for that. And then to have a lady like Danielle Smith come out of the blue and now be trying to win her riding. And if she wins that, then she gets in. Now she's running for leadership. Is like, how do you prepare for that? Mm-hmm. Personally, I have a hard time going, she can't get in and enact some changes. Or a couple others, there's different people there. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a full-blown optimist, but I look at that and I go, I'm curious to see what happens. I want to see it happen. And I want to see what comes of it. And I'm really hopeful that good things follow with it. But don't kid yourself, like the BlackRocks and all that. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's another one. Somebody should, if you're listening to us two yahoos, and you're like, what are they talking about? Just do a little dive. You don't even have to go that deep, but you just start to understand. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that they own pretty much everything. Yeah. And I don't mean like all of it. I just mean controlling parts and really influential people.
It'd be pretty nice companies. To have, 20% of Twitter, 20% of Pfizer, 20% of Moderna, 20% of, Gorman Rupp, 20% of Raytheon, 20% of every military industrial complex, 20%, like that is the big people. And then you say, and they don't have, and
they own parts of like John Deere dealerships.
They own parts of everything.
Right? So you go like, the deeper you dive on it, the closer to home, I guess, for me it gets. Right. It's like Twitter, oh yeah, whatever. Okay, Twitter, whatever. Okay, yeah, whatever. But like, the deeper you dive, the closer it gets to home. That's what's so, I don't know, shocking about it, or whatever the word is. Mm-hmm. It's like, but that one, I understand where you're coming from.
Right, for sure. And that's where, the John Deere dealerships, it's easier, and probably for a good portion of the population, that really puts it starkly in front of their face. But when you think of the one like Twitter, which this is what was so interesting to me about when Elon Musk comes out and says, I'm going to buy Twitter for double the valuation, I go, fuck, that is genius, because I know who owns Twitter. I've looked into this stuff, and I know the big players, not just BlackRock, like the Saudi prince, the Prince of Saudi Arabia has a pretty good chunk of it. And these people, and they don't own it because of the money they make. That is a draw. Like the money that BlackRock makes off of Twitter is not even a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of their total hold. It is completely nothing to them. They have it for a different reason, because they want to have, their hand on the pulse, their ability to the influence they get out of that is so much different than what they get out of the money of it, right? And I go, there's no way they sell. But now he said, I'm going to offer double. So now they have shareholders, and now that really raised some questions. Now they say, no, we're not going to sell this for double. Well, why would you? You guys are the, capitalism is everything. Why wouldn't you, right? And I feel like more than anything, that's what Elon Musk was doing, is showing, hey guys, you guys should realize what is going on and who owns these things that you think are just these open things for everybody to use. I mean, if anybody gives it more than twice a look, it doesn't seem all that open. It seems kind of unfairly skewed for who is able to grow. And it's funny to look at all these, conservative Twitter accounts or whatever, that just, as soon as he announced that, magically all the shadow bans, the algorithm start working, and they just explode with popularity before he even made the purchase. But, them just trying to cover up the shit they've been doing. It is fascinating to me. But like, that's the stuff of, it's so easy to be labeled with a conspiracy theory brush. And that's why I'm so loath, and I always try and keep as far away from it, because like, I know all those conspiracy theories, and I've never read, I don't listen to Alex, I don't listen to any conspiracy theories, but I just am able to, I take in a ridiculous amount of content. Like,
sometimes I like to listen to conspiracy theories just to get the bright. Oh yeah, absolutely. I should, like, Alex Jones is a little, I don't know. It's a lot. Yeah. But every once in a while you tune in to just see what he's saying. Right. And you go, oh man.
So I should caveat that with, I do listen to Alex Jones, but not on his, I listen when Alex Jones is on Flagrant 2, which is one of my favorite comedians podcast. I love it. It's amazing. When he goes on Joe Rogan, it's amazing.
Because Joe holds him accountable.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's the thing. And it's a different kind of account. And Andrew Schultz holds him accountable in a different way, where he's going to make fun of him and like get him riled up. And it's not the same way that Joe is trying to actually keep it on the rails. But I've listened to so much of Joe. I've listened to so much of Andrew. I know where their blind spots are and where they're susceptible to it. So then I can have that. It's my life raft of reality when you get into the waters of Alex Jones, of like, you are so easily, he has so much shit that's right. I will never, I would never say he doesn't, but you are so, it's so precarious diving into those waters. There's sharks in those waters. There's so much shit that can get you just in the society we live in. And it would be nice if there was no sharks in any waters and you were fully intellectually free to take in whatever you want, but that's just not the reality we live in. It is dangerous to go down those waters. But when I can hear him on a Joe Rogan, where I have that life route, at least, and Joe Rogan's not perfect either, right? I fully understand that, but that's why I've listened to 2,000 episodes, I don't know, some crazy, ungodly amount of hours of him. I know pretty well where he stands on most things and where he's susceptible, where his blind spots are, and I can at least use that as a guidepost to take in some of those content, right? And I could point to some, like Adam Curry. He is like the godfather of podcasts. He started one of the first podcasts. He's an awesome guy and has crazy, crazy knowledge and has such a diehard fan base for so many years that he's built up, that he's completely off the pipeline of of financially. He is so unencumbered and so into, like, he is the perfect independent media. And he went on Rogan, and he was one of the first ones that I heard on Rogan vocally talk about BlackRock and everything they own and all this stuff, and asking questions and a bunch of the COVID stuff. And he just went out because he doesn't give a fuck. And you could just tell, and you can hear with how he talks about it. And it was so funny to watch the weeks after that. Like, not that was a big, like Adam Curry didn't get all that much media attention. It wasn't this big, like they weren't throwing shit out. Yeah. It wasn't like when he had, Sanjay Gupta on or one of those other guys. Because it wasn't all about conspiracy. There's just a part at the end of, like, probably maybe an hour in, 2 hours in, they talk about this, and he just doesn't care. He talks about it. And then to see the absolute shitstorm that followed for Joe Rogan that we just got to see, of they went after him for this and that, and and everyone's thinking, oh, this is the COVID stuff. It's like, was it? Because that seems pretty convenient. He's been pretty much on this COVID stuff for a long time. Then he has Adam Curry on, and he goes after BlackRock, and then it's just the shitstorm, right? Like the videos come out, and everyone, and it's like, man, that was interesting to me to see that, because I thought could just be coincidence, could just be timing. You never know, but that was a pretty big coincidence to me to see that. I was like, oh, that, I can connect a couple dots there. Maybe, who knows? I don't know, but
Rogan's a big guy, but that's a big swing to take against,
But he didn't even do it. He just sat there and let Adam Curry do it, right?
But on his show, right?
I don't think Rogan had ever said the words BlackRock ever. And I know Rogan, he's a conspiracy. Now, he knows that shit, right? Like, and I'd never heard it from him. But then since Adam Curry brought it up, I've heard him a couple more times bring it up, because that almost opened the flood. Well, okay, it's come up, because Rogan's probably like, I don't want to go against a guy like that. Is, he's the, probably the biggest guy on the planet in terms of, reach and influence and that. But even he's probably like, that maybe isn't the battle I feel like taking on right now. But that kind of knocked him into it. Now they've already kind of threw everything they can at him. They've played almost every card they could to try and discredit him. And now it's out in the open, right?
Yeah,
like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then, sorry, we went down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I want to get back to this is awesome. This happens every time we sit down, and we haven't even been drinking beers this time. We have no excuse. Get back to Ottawa, because from everything up until this point, there hasn't been any negative, right? But I know at the end of this, it results in you kind of going black for 2 months and not hearing from you. And the way you put it out was quite cryptic. It almost sounded like something really bad happened. And I'm just I want to keep going with the story, because I want to see where it turned, because everything up until this has been positive, affirming. It's kumbaya. Everybody's having an amazing time. Can we jump back into that and just tell the rest of the story until you get home? Because if you're willing to talk about it, I've been endlessly curious since that time.
Well, the first thing I got to do is, for anyone who listens to the show, I don't know, like now I don't know, is an apology what I need to do? I didn't realize how many people were holding on to me as a lifeline. And then when you went dark, like it sent people, like everyone thought there was a lot of different things that people thought. So I didn't mean to be cryptic, other than the sense that even now, what are we, almost 3 months later, whatever it is, I still am trying to grasp. Sort it out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the way I try and explain it, and we can sit here and, like I say,
have as many hours as we need.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the way I say it is, it's a culmination of a lot of things. One is, like, I cannot begin to tell you, well, you already know this, the amount of emotion that was like stored up for 2 years, thinking you're crazy, thinking nobody's out there, no matter how many people I talk to.
Yeah.
I remember going like, man, maybe I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's no, and then seeing it across Canada, you go, nope, and so that emotion is, I don't know how to explain. It's like the Oilers win the Stanley Cup, but they win the Stanley Cup every single day. And oh, by the way, the Calgary Flames are going to win the Stanley Cup the same year, and then Vancouver the same year, and everybody's winning the Stanley Cup. Everybody's just winning. Everybody's getting the Stanley Cup this year. So everybody's just joyous. So there's this immense.
That's what you were feeling in Ottawa.
Yes, all the way to Ottawa.
Right.
So there's this immense amount of emotion. There was stress. You know, I talk about the SWAT, and I had a friend there I knew, and he as soon as he saw the rifles they were carrying, he's like, man, those aren't rubber bullets. Like that's like they are here mean business. And so you buy into some of the rumors going around. I had to stop listening to rumors, but you got an immense amount of stress now because I don't know if I've ever said this aloud to anyone, certainly not on the show, is like where we parked. We parked down a back alley. They put us in. The first day I wasn't even thinking about it. And then when everybody came in, you couldn't get out. Ooh. Right? So my vehicle's trapped. Yeah. Which at the time I was like, we'll find a way to move it. It's not that big a deal. And then, there's unease
that comes with that.
Yeah. So
just you saying that gives me that.
So now there's SWAT, and then there's Antifa, and then there's all these rumors flying. And you're just like, I got a young family and a wife back home. And so you got an immense amount of emotion. I cannot explain how much emotion there is. It's like going to a rock concert, but it never ends. Yeah. You wake up and the horns are going, and you walk out and you're just like, wow, this is
You're seeing new people that have the same
Yeah. And so you got that. You got this immense amount of stress, though. The third night I'm there, we lost our hotel rooms. And so now we got a vehicle trapped and nowhere to sleep. Wow. And so lack of sleep plays into it. And then, this is the hardest one I've been trying to... This is the hardest one to talk about because it's so out there and I don't know how to explain it. But there was a spiritual aspect to what went on there.
Of course there is.
That I don't even know how to explain, right?
And so you weren't a very spiritual guy to go in.
Exactly.
Whereas I'm that type. I probably, if I was there, I have the language because I listen to so many guys like Aubrey Marcus that live in that world that I've at least taken. Right. You probably don't even have the terms to describe what you felt.
So I just feel like I was a freight train full of all this energy, and in Ottawa there was a brick wall, and I hit it head on. I didn't understand what I was going into. I didn't, I went there thinking I was going to do some interviews. It was going to be a nice little protest, and I was going to come home. And what I got sucked into was like one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. Yeah. But at the same token, it was probably one of the most dangerous experiences that a man can ever be a part of. Because, this is a giant worldwide focused protest where you can't get your vehicle out. And there are forces actively trying to make life difficult. There is the game of telephone going on there like I've never seen before, in that, they're ramming cop cars. And so then truckers are losing their mind and running out on the street and blocking things. And it's a complete rumor and nobody's ramming cop cars, right? But that's how the first days were going. Everybody was stressed, tired out. I stayed at a hotel with all the main leaders. I don't know how the hell that happened. Yeah. I can't sit here and act like that was my grand plan, because that was not Shaun's grand plan. Just the way it happened, all of a sudden you're at a hotel with all these people, and you're like, it was like day 3 and the cops roll in. No, day 1 and the cops roll in. And I'm like, how the fuck am I here? And I haven't planned any of this, right? And so it's like when I went black or darked out or whatever, when I just stopped recording, that might have been my tether to the outside world, I would say, in that it was keeping me sane, actually releasing a podcast and letting people know I was okay, because I was okay. Yeah. But as soon as I stopped doing that, I don't know, man. It's such a hard thing to try and explain, because you just heard all the things going on. It's a culmination of a shitstorm soup in a sense. Was it healthy and safe and everything? Oh yeah, absolutely. But there were parts of it for my psyche. I can't talk about everybody else. For me, that was really, really hard to deal with, and I had no idea I was walking into that. I can't explain.
You were mentally prepared.
I was not mentally prepared, and I was naive. I was like, no, it'll be fine, right? And I should have been going, okay, this is why we're not going to stay downtown.
Would you say that you got sucked into the belly of the beast when you went to Ottawa?
Yeah.
Could you phrase it that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
The way you described it as as being in a freight train full of energy and just slamming into this brick wall and being so absorbed in it that you stopped recording and your connection to the outside world was kind of severed. Would you describe that as kind of just being enveloped into like the belly of the beast and getting so caught up in it?
Yeah, like that. I think that's really well put. Yes. This is why it's like here I sit months later and I think about this daily, and I'm trying to work through it, because for me it's hard to talk about, but it's hard to talk about because I still don't know what the hell I actually experienced there. And
until you start talking about it and try and talk about it, and don't worry, I got some questions and some clarifications, right? Like, so I imagine like, and where I get to with those questions, this is kind of maybe an insight into how I do podcasts in general, is just, I try to listen to the story and feel what it would feel like and what I would feel in that situation, and then try and pose a question to see how far off or how much off the mark, because everybody's different. You're not going to feel exactly what I would have felt, right? And
absolutely not. Yeah.
So now, exactly kind of what Mohammed just brought up is you brought up that idea of like just this freight train of emotion of going back for 2 years. You're just like you're trying to make change and you're trying to push forward, and it's that exactly what you said. You feel so lonely and so like everyone's telling you you're crazy. This is what I felt. That this is like when I went on that trip to the US, that was the thing that was like at the end. I was at the end of my rope of, I'm so sure I'm not crazy, and I'm so sure of everything I've done and all the research. Like, I've seen the numbers. I know this is not bullshit, but every factor in life is telling me that you're wrong. You're a bad person. You're all these, pick a label that, Trudeau got on TV and said that you are. Then you finally get some light at the end of the tunnel, and it starts to, you see something that excites you, and then it ramps up, and then you're so sure that this is going to be the change, right? That feeling that I brought up of, this must be the thing, this must be the thing. If there was anything in the last 2 years of baloney that seemed like it was going to be that thing that broke the dam, that saw change come from it, it was going to be this. And then you are so sure that every sign around you is pointing in this positive direction, like this is going to make the change. And then once again, the forced reality of what they're trying to paint it into, of the rumors going around, the feeling, the fear that they're trying to conjure up in your heart that is creating that dissonance from you. Like, what was making it hard? Was it that the change wasn't happening and everything that was being thrown out was bucking up against it? Was it that brick wall that you talk about of them not allowing it, and not only not allowing, but doubling down, sending in more SWAT guys as they kind of, the hearts get softened of the people that are there, them changing them out, them bringing in horses, and like, was that the part that was making it tough, or was it just a personal thing of like just the stress of being there and just like kind of having enough? Also, I would imagine missing your young family and wanting to be at home, probably a bit of homesickness too. Like, I'm trying to put myself in that picture of,
imagine. So one, I would be like, like watching Trudeau not address us was like, and I say us as just in like of addressing Canada, what's going on in his country was wild to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, here's the leader of the country with thousands of people on his doorstep and acting like they're not there. Yeah. I'm like, oh. And I think what sunk into me was how grave of a situation I'd put myself into. And I literally mean that. Like, I did not realize when I saw Trudeau talk and not address the trucker convoy, I was like, oh shit. Yeah. Like, he could send in military right now, and CBC isn't going to cover it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Obviously he doesn't care. He thinks we're a fringe minority.
Yeah.
And you're like, I have put myself in a bit of a situation. Tag on to it the SWAT. Tag on to it now that everybody's talking these rumors about every room being bugged. Talk about people talking witchcraft. Talk about, like, I'm telling you, there was some weird mojo going on there.
I bet.
That I can't fully comprehend.
Yeah.
But then there was the amount of fear trying to be pumped in there to try and make it something that it wasn't, was wild to watch as well.
And to feel. Yes. And again, this is maybe putting me more in the shoes, but I imagine yourself too of, Dan Carlin is always one of the biggest guys that talks about this. And I think this is one of the biggest messages you can get out of his content, other than just the amazing history that you learn, was before almost every major atrocity in the entire world, the first step is that they dehumanize the group that is about to have something really bad happen to them. And that was one of the biggest things that gave me a really bad feeling in my stomach, being thousands, and about as far away from Ottawa as I could have been at that time. I'm down living my life. I'm in California, seeing me and Chase's other best friend Fraser in San Francisco, going out drinking. Went to the UFC in Texas, but the whole time I'm keeping an eye on back, and I'm seeing the way they are dehumanizing people and calling them terrorists and all these labels, and that is the first step, and that was making me very uneasy. And I don't know if you'd ever thought about that especially, but that's probably what you were feeling, because you've done your research. You've read Gulag Archipelago. You've read, I know what you've read. I know the research you've done, and maybe it wasn't as cut and dry of, oh, this is why I'm feeling this, but the red flags of what you'd seen before in the research, you're probably starting to feel it and say like, ooh, not saying that something bad is going to happen, but all the red flags are coming up, and all this things
what
are
happened
brewing.
to Tamara Litch and Chris Barber and all these different people who were put in jail. Dan Bulford, a friend of the show, he gives himself up to the rest. Like, I was home by then, but that was one of the few times I went on social media to see it for myself. Yeah. And I was like devastated because, and it's wild to me that people like that I got to see firsthand along the road, meet there. I already knew Dan Bulford and half the doctors from the podcast before. Tamara, I got to meet, could they have been there for nefarious reasons? Absolutely. I don't think so. Like, I literally was there. I saw a majority of it. Were there some bad actors? Yeah, I think that's come out a little bit. But a lot of the people who were on the, stuck to the fence post, or thrown in jail.
Pushed against the wall,
Yeah, like, were good people. And they've been pushed into a corner now. And I knew, it was like day one, first day one, where I got told, and now that I look back on it, I laugh because it isn't true. But at the time, I took it for very serious. And what I got told was, you do a podcast? I'm like, yeah. Okay, good. We need you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm interviewing people anyways. But I got to be honest, I don't have that big of a following. And they looked at me like, well, you're about to. You're about to have 1 million followers. This is worldwide. And I'm like, I can sit here and say, do I want 1 million followers? Sure, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right? Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know if I
know exactly what you're saying, especially like that, too.
And then on top of it, I'm like, if it happens, I'm like, so then the next thought that going through my head is like, do media people go to jail for covering a story if they're the voice of part of it? I'm like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And you want to say no, but even if you think they shouldn't, but shouldn't has not held sway for the last 2 years. There was so many things that shouldn't have happened that have just, and you would never thought could happen. So
you come back to stress again. So was I stressed? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was there a ton of emotion and energy there? And I use the word energy because one of my best friends makes fun of me because he's like, until you went to Ottawa, I never heard you use that word. And I'm like, I don't know what other freaking word to use. That's what was there, right? Mm-hmm. Pressure. It was a pressure cooker, right?
Sure it was.
There was a ton of good people there. And now there are stories about them, like Dan, I bring up Dan Bulford a lot, right? And that he's, undercover. He's working for the government and he implanted himself. I'm like, I don't know, maybe. Yeah. But then that means I can't trust anyone.
Yeah, because I just got bamboozled by it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so that's the distrust that's trying to be sewed into everything is like, you can't trust anyone. It's like,
except the media.
Right. At some point you gotta I don't know. Ottawa's tough. I don't talk about it, I haven't talked about it, not because I don't want to, because it's like, you guys can hear it. I'm trying my best. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot there. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that happened while I was there that I still am trying to understand what it was,
Yeah. And what it was to begin with. And then to understand, you don't know how you feel about it, but you don't even know what it was. So you're just trying to parse out, what did I even see? What did I experience? So then you can do the work. Once you've done that, then you can, okay, and then how do I feel about that? But when you're trying to do how do I feel about this? But you don't even know, you still haven't even processed what you just went through, right? Like, that's going to take some time. And something that has that much energy to it, right? To use that word, I use that word all the time. I have no bones about it, but that is something that changes a person and takes a long time to come to grips with. And it's probably going to take you a long time. or a good trip of mushrooms or something. But you know what I mean? One of those things. But just for myself, and maybe this will help straighten out in your head too, and help people come along that journey and help you maybe in the future explain it once you already have the base of getting it out once. But the time of going dark, of when you stopped putting things out, stopped releasing the podcast, stopped doing the social media posts, you were still in Ottawa at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. How long had you been there when you made that decision to go dark? And then how long did you stay afterwards before you headed back out west to the family?
I think we arrived on Sunday, and I believe I had a podcast come out Monday, and then so that would mean Tuesday is when I recorded all day Monday. I have material that I've never released before.
Really?
Yeah, it's sitting. I've listened to majority of it, and it's just from people that I met on the street and around, and there's some tough stuff in there to listen to and whatever, but like nothing crazy. Just people from the street. And it was that night that I probably stayed up till 3 a.m. and I edited it all. Like I had the episode ready to go and I just didn't release it. And I'd love to sit here and say, I know why I didn't do that, but I literally have no idea why I didn't do that. I was tired. There was a whole bunch going on and I just didn't release it. And as soon as I didn't release it, the stress of having to go out and release another podcast the next day disappeared because now I've broken the I'm a consistency guy. Everybody knows that. I release when I say I'm going to release. So as soon as I didn't do that, I don't know. It was just like, kind of like, I don't need to release another one. I don't think I need to. And then things spiraled. And as they spiraled, it didn't get better. It got worse. And I was there until Friday. So for, what is that, like 3 days? And then I headed home and I got back. Like we drove back. So,
and you spoke about earlier about that decision to go. Or I don't know. It feels after hearing this, it feels odd even calling it a decision. Just whatever happened that ended up making you go dark like that. You said it kind of was that connection to the outside world, that life raft of sanity within that just crazy energy that you're feeling. It's just so hard. Like calling it crazy puts a negative connotation.
No, but put it this way: when we drove out of Ottawa, all you had to do was get like 4 blocks away, and all of a sudden you realized regular life was going on. It was a complete bubble being there,
for sure,
and you didn't realize anything existed outside the bubble.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden you pop out of it, and you're like, oh, people are just going about their everyday life. You know, the media attention focus from the world on one little tiny spot on the planet. When you think about that, that's wild. Because when as we drove back across the entire country, I'm like, literally, this is different than I thought it was going to be. Right? I don't know what I thought the journey home was going to be, but like the further you got away from it, it wasn't such a. The energy just disappeared, right? Like, but being in the heart of it, the belly of the beast is, your Jamie would say, Muhammad, right? That's cool sitting over there. Anyways, was on full display when you got away from the heart of it, because when you were there, you didn't realize the rest of the world was going on. Like you were sucked in. Yeah.
And just this might be even a little bit further to the hippy dippy side of it, but like, you have to imagine, at least I have to imagine with how I live life and how, non-realistic I can get sometimes, but to know that there is such a spotlight on that area, that you were a part of it, and everybody else that's within that area knows that there are millions of eyes on them. They might not be thinking about that every moment of every day, but there's an understanding, and that like ramps up the energy, and everyone to feel that. Like I can imagine that feedback loop would create some energy that would be hard to see, or hard to even imagine if you're not one of those few people. Not few, there's quite a few, but people that are within it, and then you step away from it.
I want to tell you a story.
Tell me a story.
And I won't use his name because there's no point in giving the name. There's a guy who was there. I would say he was very much like me. This isn't like me talking about me. This was an actual guy. Okay. And he went in thinking this was going to be a protest, which it was. And the first day, there's a lot of God talk, spirituality, just name it. And it was on full display. And you're kind of like, well, this is kind of strange. Like, this is...
I was unprepared for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, this is weird. And then the second day, there's more of it. And it almost becomes a little bit normalized because you're around it now and you're like, oh, strange things are happening.
Yeah.
By day 3, people are praying all over the place because they believe they're, this is what's really hard to talk about it. And lots of people say you shouldn't talk about it. But I'm like, well, how else are you going to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Tons of people went there because they're faith believers and they have been persecuted for the last 2 years, maybe longer, but for the last 2 years on full display. And they go there and everything took on larger meanings than life.
Right.
And so by day 3, the same guy who was very much like me that was like, I stopped going to church when I was 18, and certainly I've gone to church since then, but, I've just never really sunk my teeth into it. You know how you talk about listening to podcasts and getting to the bottom of COVID. Yeah. Geez, you think, what if we did that to the Bible? People do. Yeah. I don't. I haven't. Yeah. But people do. And so, people started equating what you were going through there to parts of different spiritual aspects. Yeah. Right. And by day 3, day 4, this guy's like, well, feels like we're in a spiritual war. Yeah. And you're like, so that's part of what went on there that nobody talks about. There was a guy who came through Lloyd who spoke at a church. And I was like, I'm going to go because he's from Ottawa and I just want to hear what he has to say. And he talked about God being everywhere in the streets. And I'm like, I don't know what to think about that. Mm-hmm. I heard a photographer from Toronto, a guy I met and really enjoyed. And one of the interviews I didn't release was me and him talking. Yeah. And what he said was, it's like going to a wedding. One of your best friends is getting married. It's the happiest day of his life. You're having a great time. Yeah. Everybody's having a great time.
Love is in the air.
Love is in the air. Mm. Everybody is drunk. But they're not drunk on alcohol. They're like punch drunk on the good emotion. Yeah. That's what I saw. That's what I felt. And to others, what they felt was God was everywhere. Right. And to another person, what they thought was whatever energy was there. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But all that mixed up and just rammed up. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know if that all makes sense.
It makes 100% sense to me. And I take that into my own religious framework in my head of how I deal with those things. And that has changed. Anybody listening to this podcast with any sort of regularity will hear me talk about this ad nauseum. It's one of my favorite subjects. Is just me going through having religion as a kid and being so vehemently opposed to it. I couldn't ask questions. I was so opposed to it. I thought, this is silly. This doesn't make sense. I know what evolution is. I'm a 6-year-old. I know what evolution is. This is stupid. You guys are stupid. This is all stupid. I don't want to be a part of this. And then over the last, I'll call it 6-7 years, completely flipping that 180 and going all the way back to I just didn't understand this. And yes, the dogma is stupid. The stories are stupid, but the underpinnings of it, there's some real meat there. And to hear people that have gone deep on the Bible, but not just the Bible. They're not just a Bible thumper or whatever you want to, pejorative you want to tell someone that is too far down that rabbit hole of the Bible. But they've done it with the Bible. They've done it with the Quran. They've done it with Buddhism, with Hinduism. And they've come to the point where they can speak to you from a point of not attached to any specific dogma of any specific religion. And those are my favorite people. One of my favorite people for it is Aubrey Marcus. Pete Holmes is a comedian. He's another one that is great within this realm and really helped open my heart back up to these ideas. And Jordan Peterson is what brought me back to the Bible. Right. And I think that's beautiful. And bringing you back to where I'm at is just bringing you back to something, because they're all the Bible, the Quran, all of it. It's all at the end of the day, the same thing. And there's good that is brought by these books. There's a lot of bad too. Don't get me wrong. But the power structures enacted to try and bring that good forth to the world is what that human nature thing we talked about earlier, of just the worst parts of humans. There's power there. Humans are corrupted by power, and religion gives a lot of power. And the frameworks that they construct to spread that power and to bring that good to the world can be captured, right? And I think that's what so many people that have issues with religion, that's what their issue is. They've never gone down the rabbit hole to see the beauty of it. But then when I hear you talk about that, I'll give you my personal framework of listen to all these people of where I got to it is that God in the framework of like what the Bible says it is does not exist. Like there's the metaphors within it point more to it, but like if you haven't gone all the way through where you have a real understanding of it, you're going to think it's some guy in the clouds, or you're going to think it's, some guy that put his son on the earth and let him die. Like that's not where I go. What I go to is God is a force in the universe. It is something that is within every person. It is what's within consciousness. It's in a dog, it's in a cat, it's in plants, it's in everything. It moves us all forward, and it's all connected somehow. Stop me at any point if I lose you, because this is some heady shit. But what I think when I hear you talk about that is that is true, and people feel that, and that's going to ring true to a lot of people that hear it. It might seem hippy dippy to some people, but then that is what the stories that you get told, the Bible is stories that are reinforcing that belief, right? And through their own lens of if you're in a church, if you're in a mosque, if you're in a monastery of some sort, they're all different stories that they come up with to try and reinforce that thing. But for 2 years, well, for many, many, many years before this, religion had kind of been down in the dumps. It'd been kicked around. It's the one thing you can still laugh at. You can't make fun of a crippled person. You can't make fun of someone's race, creed, religion. The only thing you can make fun of is religion, because now religion became that thing where everyone gets a free kick at, which is a dangerous thing to have in society. Free kicks are not good, because there's some piece of humanity that when life kicks you, and when you get kicked, you want to kick back. When you give free kicks at people, there's so many people out in the world that have been kicked by life that they're going to want to kick if there's a free kick. That's what pylon culture is. That's what cancel culture is. It's all the same thing, that human nature. So not only has that been kicked around, but then now you have this group of people for 2 years now that believe this. They've been getting they're the punchline of the joke for years, and it's getting more so and more so every year. When you go to university, it's hilarious. Like there's religion is such a dirty word on a campus of the so-called intellectuals these days. It's almost abhorrent. Like it tears me to pieces, because it's just so what's the word? It's so egotistical to me to think that you're that right, that you're so sure about something that's so big and so nobody can know, and to be so sure that it's wrong, and to look at people downward for that. But anyways, again, going down rabbit holes. So now they feel this interconnection between everyone, like this the way I like to look at it is that you are me, I am you, like that thing that connects us all. It's almost, I don't believe this, but it's a good thought experiment to think of, kind of get you to where I do think of. Everybody is you living a different life, right? And you've probably heard that before in some other way, but that's what it is. That consciousness, whatever that is that's within all of us, is all connected. And now you have 2 years where everybody's pulled apart, and you don't get to feel that goodness that you feel at a wedding, like that. I think I just bumped my mic out again. Maybe it's my headphones. That feeling that you get at a wedding when everyone's connecting, and that thing that I talked about is running through everybody, and everyone's feeling it. Everyone's been completely disconnected from that, especially those that have a more tighter connection to that feeling through their religion, right? You're going to be more tapped into that part of yourself if you've lived a life where you go to church every Sunday and you have things that are actively trying to bring that out of you and to respect it and to hold that in high esteem, where there's a lot of people that don't. But now you get those people all in a place where for 2 years they've been demonized and called all these things for something that they hold high in value. And now you get to reconnect that, and now everybody can feel it, and they're doing these good things to each other, and they're feeling that feedback loop of doing good for other people feels good, in my opinion, because that is you in another life. That is you in a different form. That's some version of you, right? And that's what the golden rule, do unto others as you do unto yourself. And it's a feedback loop. That's by being good to people around you feels good, and spreading good. Having people reach out to you about the podcast feels good, because it's selfish in a way, because you are helping yourself in a way. And the people that are closer to you, whether in proximity or in value, like it feels better to do something for your family than maybe someone that's going to have less impact, because you've shared more with them, and that piece of you is bounced back more times. We have more interaction, and you've given more of yourself to them. And I'm really struggling. This is a really hard topic for me. Like, it all makes sense in my head, but it's hard to get out. So now you have all these people that have a shared good and are all just there's feedback loops happening all over. They're doing nice things. They all feel connected, and it's almost an overjoyment of that true religious. Like, it's easy to say, oh, it's just these one religion or another, and that's the people that are out there, and that's what's animating them. But it's way deeper than that. If even people like yourself that didn't come in with any religious upbringing, it's still connected with you because it's something that's way deeper than any one religion. It's the same thing that underpins every different religion. They have just different stories they tell to try and get you there. And that's what it tapped into. And that's what people were so starved of for 2 years and what was so dangerous. And I think that's what the powers that be are so scared of, is that there is that interconnectedness, and they want to keep people fighting between people, because once you connect, they all feel that and feel how true and right that is. And to have those conversations, just like we talked about, and all the danger that happens when you disconnect that. But that's exactly what they want, because that's how they keep control of people. It's to keep people fighting within each other, to keep people scared, to keep people nervous, to keep people locked in so that they don't open up and have that experience of sharing whatever that ephemeral thing, like I called it God to start that whole rampage, but you can put whatever word on it. It's just that I think that I call it that because that's what got me into the idea, to get me to the point where I can understand it on my own, apart from any framework of God or religion. That's how it got me into that. But that doesn't surprise. Everything you said made exactly sense through my own framework of that. Everything you were saying makes exact sense to me. Right. And that's due to all those people, you know, the Jordan Petersons of the world, the Pete Holmes, the Aubrey Marcus, of that idea where if you could take a time machine, clip that 5 minutes or whatever I was just ranting about religion, transport it back to me at 18 or me at 19, and I say, who the fuck is that? Because I was so anti-religion, and it's so funny to be so far on the other side of it and have that make complete sense to me. I don't know, but like then to hear you go through that experience, like, yeah, that's going to be a religious experience. It doesn't matter what your framework is. It is a religious experience. Like once you understand that religion isn't tied to any book or any stories. It's way deeper. It's human culture. It's consciousness, and we are connected in some way. And I think I'd be hard pressed to hear someone make an argument that we're not. It maybe, you get squirrely when you try and define it, and that's what religions are, is trying to define that thing or lay claim to it, that they understand how or why. But I don't know. I don't even know how I was going to tie it all back in, but yes, that makes sense. What you're saying made exact sense to me the whole time you're saying it.
But what you just said there is, there's a lot to what you just said, right?
I think there is, yeah.
And I always talk about chewing on things, and I got a nice drive ahead of me, and I'm going to have to chew on some things all over again. But it's nice to talk about. I've been careful not to open too much about it, because at the same time, I'm like, I better make sure that I'm ready to talk about it, right?
Right. And ready is one thing, but I wonder, it's such a difficult thing to talk about. It just intrinsically is going to be difficult to talk about. But I had some feelings that might have been what's happened there, that it probably was pretty religious from my framework of it. But like you say, the only coverage people got was so far removed from that story didn't get told, that I think a lot of people listening are going to be very surprised by that aspect, about the religious aspect of it, where it doesn't surprise me as much, but I'm kind of living in this where I have a lot of, passion and
it surprised the shit out of me.
It surprised the shit,
and not from the sense that people were, there was a religious aspect of it, just how, I think the word powerful would be the right one to attach to it. The feeling of being around that was, and I don't even know how to explain it more than that. And that's going to take time all over again. Right. But like, we do live, when you talk about going to church as a kid and being like, this is stupid, whatever. I just remember them talking about Armageddon when I was like grade 8 and being like, great. That's what I have to look forward to, like the world is ending. And so when it didn't end, I went, you were wrong. And I moved on with life. And I went, there was no meaning in that whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then Jordan Peterson starts talking openly about it. I was listening to him on the way up again. And like I went back to his early ones where he's breaking down Genesis and things like that and his own thoughts. And I see holes in what he says. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is just like, man, it's just nice to have somebody talk about that in a sense that is a larger story. Mm-hmm. Is kind of one of the original stories. It's
the story that every other story that's been told is now based off of,
And so it's like, is there a reason we all can get that? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's like the archetypical hero. Like, why does that story resonate with so many people? Jordan Peterson has a lovely way of just breaking it down. You're like, as soon as he says it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Do you want to take an attempt at breaking down how he says it? Because it's you can never do as good as Jordan does.
No,
and we obviously encourage people to go listen to it. And I've tried a couple times I know exactly the point you're talking about like, I can take an attempt if you want. Like, just, He talks about it of humans being, before we got writing, right? When all we could do was talk, and speech was a huge, huge thing for consciousness and, planning and all these things. And anybody can take 5 minutes to think about how speech would impact an animal, and you can do some things. And writing did the same thing when they got to it, but way, way, way before we got writing, right? The Bibles were in the time of writing, but those stories were told for years and years and years. And
when you have to pass down a story over time, if you just pass down words, that's one thing. But when you put it into a story form, or no different if you're studying for something, or you want to remember something, a song form, right? Like
ABCs,
it just ingrains itself, and it's really easy to remember.
Yeah.
So now you can understand why you put it into a story form that has an arc to it of how he grows, some stumbles and everything, and then people like, oh, that makes sense, and it's easy to tell over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, if you're making a movie, you look at that and you go, okay, this is what's going to happen, because this is what the audience wants, because we've wanted this for thousands of years. And all of a sudden you have what you have.
Exactly. And it's not even what we want. It's what we see. It's what they saw. So now you back up 5,000 years, 10,000 years before any Bible, any Quran, any of those books were ever written. And those same stories were being told and passed on. And what are they telling stories about? What they see in day-to-day life. They're just telling stories about human nature in the most raw way possible, because it was just survival back then. It was so much of it was just about making it to the next day and passing down what is going to be helpful in that venture of survival. And you get to see the best and the worst of humanity documented so that you can learn from it.
In history, or I think it was in history, one of the classes, we learned about pilgrimages, and they did that to Mecca over out east. And I was wondering, I wonder what that's like, and then this was the Canadian form of a pilgrimage. That's the easiest way to explain it, right? You're traveling a long way to get to a destination. So along the way,
and then there's a religious experience,
right?
Which you didn't plan on, but
bingo,
sure shit,
right? So you're getting to experience amazing human beings that give you everything they have, and you're giving them everything you have. You're so open. It's like, you need a room to sleep? Here. You need a shower? Have it. You need food? Like we showed up to Thunder Bay, and we hadn't eaten in a while, and a group of truckers just had they're like, we're being given so much food, take what you want. I'm like, no, you take what you want. Otherwise, it's going in the dumps. You take everything you want, because we can't eat it all. Oh, okay. So then and then that's like extrapolated or multiplied tenfold. The further you went along, that's what it was.
And everyone's passing that along too, because then how likely are you to then take that? You have that sitting in your heart, and then you want to go bring that to everybody else.
You pay it forward.
Exactly.
And so what happened was, this pilgrimage across, you got to see this, and you got to understand what the convoy going through meant to people, and what the people being out on the road meant to the people driving. Because if there's nobody there, you've kind of been like, oh, well, whatever. But people saw it. Then they joined it, because they were so emotionally moved by seeing it that they joined in. There was people that got involved with it early on. They were going to hop off at, let's say, Regina. Yeah. Okay, I'll go to Saskatoon. I'm going to make the Ontario border. Pretty soon they're in Ottawa. Why? Because it couldn't. This is, when they say this is history, this was literally history. I stories should be written about this. But now I understand why.
Podcast should be done about it.
This is why a pilgrimage is such a powerful thing. You get a group of people, like you said, they come together. They have that,
whatever name you want to put to that connection.
That connection of human interaction. It's a community, right? Why is a community so healthy? I go back to Jordan. I always love Jordan Peterson's. It's a study on rats, but you want to get a rat addicted to cocaine. You don't put them together with other rats, because they have no use for it. You put them alone by themselves, and then you can get them addicted to cocaine pretty quick. Well, to me, the longer it went, the more that made complete sense. The more apt I was to drink more than I would have been. It's no different in Canada, when it's the dark, dreary months of winter versus the sun shining right now. It's just, it's mood, it's temperament, and everything. Being around people, humans like that. Yeah. So you do a pilgrimage with people all going to the same place for the religious experience, which I would have never thought of. Yeah. But just those connections you make along the way are powerful, because everybody's going on a long journey to find something. And that is something for themselves, I would say, not for the other person. And along the way, you're going to give up parts of yourself. You're gonna help people,
and you're gonna take energy from all those people on the highway, all the way. You're taking that energy on, and you're bringing it with you, and you're carrying it forward.
Yes,
yeah. It's not even the people that just went on the pilgrims. All the people you saw along the way, they were giving their energy, sitting out for 3 hours in the cold on the side of the road for the express purpose of giving you that energy exchange. They know what they're doing, right? Like, not everybody's sitting there like, oh, I got to go out there because I got to give my energy to these guys. Like, they're not. Nobody thinks in those terms.
Nobody thinks.
Just like the religion, nobody thinks in the terms. It's the message behind the thing. And if you only live in the world of what you can intellectually understand, you're missing 99% of life, right? Like, so much is more is in the subconscious, and we don't even know what we're doing when we do things like that. But it is when you sit down like this, a couple months removed, and you try and think back on it, it makes a lot more sense. And those feelings that are hard to parse out and to understand make a lot of sense in hindsight once you can actually sit there and.
Well, I've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of people off air.
Yeah.
Just to try and make sense of some of it, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of it, I don't know. I just, it's so difficult to understand. Yeah. Which I know I've said that a lot here today. Yeah. Right? Like
I think people will really understand that too, that like hearing from you. Yeah. It sounds like it'd be pretty hard to me sitting here trying to do nothing but understand and ask questions. Yeah, I get it. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, and it makes sense. It's hard to wrap my head around because when I put myself in your shoes, I don't know what I would know what to do with it. You know what I mean? And I, fancy myself as I was probably the exact right guy that should have been there because of this matches up with all my interests. And I've been, it almost feels like with everything I've been doing and all the things I've been listening to and, interesting guys like Peterson and Aubrey that I've been following. It's almost like I was destined to be there and to feel that too. And I just didn't go, and I went on my own little pilgrimage, which was, we don't have time to get into, but eerily similar to what you're talking about of just going on like, it's funny how it all works out. Of just at the same time that you were doing this, I was going a complete different direction for complete different reasons and having so much of the same conclusions at the end of it, which is funny to me. But
it's, it always brings up Heraclitus to me. Heraclitus, one of the quotes he has back in Roman days is no man can ever enter the same river twice because the river changes and he changes. And I think about that lots because I'm like, well, obviously, at 28 I had no kids, and at 30 you got a kid, so you're obviously changed. But this is an event that now I get to go back through. I'm working back through a bunch of Jordan Peterson because he always has a way of, he's like soothing to my brain, I would say, right? He has a real nice way of breaking things down and working through things. And I've listened to it all once before. And I thought I got it back then. Yeah. And now I'm like, you're wrong there. You're bang on there. Yeah. You're bang on there. Right. And that's been really fun for me because, I would say, I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, and we got to find a way to get you back to Lloyd so you can hop on in the studio.
I'd love to.
Is when I first started the podcast, the idea was, I want to shine a spotlight on Lloyd and community and just show that we had some people that, we're off in the boonies. Yeah. And I wanted to show that and I would say after about 30 episodes, my brain changed and I started to look for truth. Now, truth is a very, we all have our truths and whatever. And what it led me to was Ottawa. And when I found some of that truth, I ran headlong into it. And now I am reeling, trying to find where the podcast will go next. Because when you aim your ship there and you point and you keep working at it, you'll get there. And you got to be prepared for when you do. And for me, it was truth. It was, I go back to Judy Reeves. It was like, how do you come out of the perfect storm, 100-foot waves, she was on a Chinese fishing vessel with no steering left. The Andrea Gale, the famous movie, goes down like north of them, a little ways north, but you get the same damn ocean, same damn storm. And I'm like, how you think you're going to die? How do you come out of that and not be forever changed? And me and her have a conversation about that. And to me, this was my perfect storm, right? Was it 100-foot waves? Well, no. And yes. Just a different type.
Yeah. So going off of that, clearly there's no way, shape, or form that you come out of that unscathed and unchanged. And now, months removed, I'm going to ask you this question. I know there's no way you can answer because this is a question I'll probably have to ask you every 3 months for the next 4 years for you to answer this. But with what you've been able to parse out so far, how has it changed you?
Well, I quit my job, one.
Right. Which you had kind of had in the works before you left.
I had it in the works, but
and congratulations, by the way, as someone that, you know, there's probably a few people in the world that understand that, you know, and that's why I loved having a conversation with you, because we both knew we were on that trajectory. We both had same things pulling at it, and we had conversations on and off the podcast about it. And I recently did it too, and I know how scary and amazing and awful, and it is so many things. You're probably gonna have to ask me that question about how it felt to make that leap for 3 months, but to know that and all those emotions, just I want to say, very proud of you. That is so awesome, and you know, from somebody that, you know, I'll never understand exactly what your shoes, but as close as it can get, you know, fucking congratulations. That is a huge, huge moment. Just not to tell you there, but.
Well, I appreciate that. How has it changed me? I would say that one of the biggest things I took from going there is I will never allow anyone to tell me what I can and cannot do. And I don't mean that by somebody was steering me there or steering me back home, but people are trying to, and you probably feel this too, people try and influence the Shaun Newman podcast. You should interview this person. Here's their number. You should talk about this. You should only talk about this, whatever. And that sounds really nefarious. But I go back to what you said earlier, really early in this conversation, is they're doing it out of like their interest, or they really believe it, or, I mean, you can put, it's not like this terrible thing. Yeah. And I just went, I'm never doing that again. And I haven't trusted my voice in a long time.
Since then?
No, before then. You mentioned like being one person off the mic and then one person on the mic. Part of that is like, I don't know if I know enough yet to be like, this is what I believe. And I'm constantly working on that. Yeah. I don't think I'll ever get there. Yeah. And I don't know if I ever want to get there. I will always want to be curious and searching for more answers. But I do also think you can be firm in what you believe in at the time. Still be receptive to hearing other sides. Yeah. But be firm in like, no, I disagree with that, and this is why. And that's how you're going to probably get to better answers. And for too long, I just let people push me around in a conversation. You know, I had Ron McLean on this last time. I can't sit here and say it was a great interview. I have no idea. Some people liked it, some people didn't. All I know is Ron would say something, and instead of me biting my tongue and being like, okay, and what else do you got to say, and hearing him out, I was just like, no, that's wrong. I probably didn't do it as well as that, because the other thing that I learned is, even though you want to speak, learning how to do it and confidently takes some practice, especially when for like 200 and some episodes, you let the guest take the lead all the time. And I still really like that. Yeah. But I've really pissed off some people by not just holding my tongue the entire time. I'm like,
I've been that listener every once in a while. I'm like, fuck Shaun, come on. Right. I know you don't believe, like, and what gives me so much respect for it is I know how hard that is. And I've sat here after an episode where I didn't push back, and nothing has bugged me more than an episode where I sit there after and go, I didn't push back. I let myself get pushed around. Like I went into a 2-week funk after I sat down with someone and I knew on some of the stuff, and I wanted to be polite.
I love Jordan Peterson. I think the world of him. But if I ever get him on, I really hope I don't let him, if there's something I disagree with, that I don't try and talk to him about it in a respectful manner.
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't think anyone is that perfect. Jordan Peterson is not that perfect.
No.
Joe Rogan's not that perfect.
Nope.
And what Joe does extremely well is he's firm, but he still listens. Yeah. And trying to find one's voice like that in what we do is like, and that is probably the toughest challenge of all, because it's like this healthy balance. Yeah. And I don't know, that's one of the things you asked what I came back from Ottawa with different. I went, I'm never, you know, and that's probably the biggest thing. That was a long answer for that.
No, and I love that answer, and it honestly ties in with so many questions that I wanted to ask, but I wasn't sure if I should ask. And was a little bit hesitant about, because I re-listened to the last episode, the episode I did when I came out to Lloyd. Sure. And we're sitting in the garden shed there, as you remember, you know, and we had a really great conversation about, like I said, to start this podcast, about things that, it was a conversation I couldn't have had with anybody else, because we were in such a similar situation. Obviously different, but similar.
But similar, yeah.
And I remember coming out of that podcast, it was an amazing conversation we covered, and I was so excited for that to release, but I was also frustrated for that exact same reason of I didn't push back. And I pushed back, and I'd re-listen to this morning. We pushed back, but that was not one of those ones where I didn't feel like I pushed back enough, but I didn't do well enough in my arguments to explain what I was trying to get about. One of the big things we're talking about was this idea of going after big guests. And I was kind of in this place where I was, talking to you about some of the big guests you'd have on. And at that point, almost your first 100 episodes, it was pretty big guest after big guest, right? And I was trying to convey to you my hesitancy to go down that route and to be that bulldog that's going to send 8 different emails and stuff. And you were trying to tell me like, no, just stop being a pussy. Do it. And I was trying to convey to you of, but there's more to it. Like I have more of a philosophy about it. And there's other reasons holding me back. And I wasn't able to do a good enough job with it. And I think I was scared to, in the same way, I was scared to push back and to be honest about my feelings about like when I listen to your podcast and stuff. And I think one of the things I was sitting there was, as a fan that listens to way too many podcasts, I'll be the first to say, I listen to too many podcasts. I have a bit of a problem, but I know what I like. And I have probably more than, like Joe Rogan always likes to say, with the life I've lived, I'm in the top 0.1% in all of history of seeing people get fucked up, because he watches so many fights and he watches so many, people get concussed and stuff. He's just saying, like, just by numbers, there's probably some like gladiatorial janitor back in the Roman days that maybe saw more, but he's high up there on the list. And I put myself like, of people that have listened to podcasts because they're only so long, I'm probably in the top 0.01% of people that listen to podcasts. I know what I like. And that exact same thing you just brought up was my biggest issue of like, there was times where from other podcasts, because you get to know somebody pretty well through a podcast and you can tell, oh, he just didn't push back there. And that was one of the things was I wanted to ask what changed, because it seemed like you had such an emphasis on big guests at the start of the podcast. And recently, almost the COVID thing almost was a middle transition to ground, because that took such a precedence that almost that's what changed you from how do you have time for going after guests when you're doing COVID episodes multiple times a week and stuff. But then after you've come back from that, it seems like you have been pushing back more. You aren't as focused on it. But where I want to go with this whole thing was what I was scared to bring up to you. And the question I wanted to ask you in that second interview is, sure, are you worried that putting such an emphasis on having big guests and as you're learning to get your feet and learning your voice as a podcaster, that you're so deferential to these big guests, which you have to be, because I'd be the same way if I had those guests. And it's not a not being ready, because you did a great job. You did so awesome with those guests and you really knocked it out of the park. I'm not saying they were bad, but like, I felt like it was what I wanted to ask you was, do you worry that would hold back your growth by having those type of guests on all the time while you're finding your voice, because you kind of have to take that deferential role? And now that you gave your answer there, it seems like almost that you gave an answer to what changed you with the Convoy. That was the answer that I thought I would get if I was to ask that question there, if that made any sense. I know that was convoluted.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought of why I didn't want to go after Don Cherry and Ron McLean and Paul Bissonnette and all these guys too early, because I'm like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. Why would I bring them on? It'll just like, it won't be good. What I learned was get them on. Yeah. Because you never know until you try. Yeah. 2, I had Paul Bissonnette on. I didn't go to the moon and back. Yeah. Like I didn't. Right. So it's like, it's not like by getting one guest on, all of a sudden you're there and back. It created buzz for sure. But I mean, so did Eric Payne. Eric Payne created a lot of buzz because it was the right guest at the right time and nobody else had gotten him. And you start to understand how media actually works and why people want to be first. Right. I would say that early on, I'm a hockey guy, and people wanted you to do hockey things. Yeah. But if you go back through, every once in a while, I'd have on, a lady like Brandy Hofer. Let me tell you, she's a fantastic woman, painter from Lloyd. Didn't do great, but I enjoyed the conversation because it wasn't, you've listened to the Tanner Bozer one. Did you love the Tanner Bozer one? Probably not. Why? Because I'm not a UFC guy. And I can be the first guy to be like, I don't know how to banter. Even Bozer in the interview looks at me funny sometimes because I'm just like, it's probably if a cricket guy interviewed an NHL guy. Yeah. It just doesn't mix. Yeah. And so I go, the reason I changed isn't because I don't want Connor McDavid on. I do. Yeah. I just right now, there's such a high priority on my list on we need to fix some things. But in saying all that, look at Joe Rogan. He still talks about UFC. He still brings on comedians and he still talks to other people. And that has not been lost on me. I just think I needed to walk and learn some lessons. So the pushback thing is like, yeah, I see Joe doing it. And I get frustrated when people say that. I'm like, the guy's got fucking like 2,000 episodes. You think he had to learn how to do that? I think he did.
Yeah.
I don't think that was just, he's a comedian. You think that helped him? I don't know. Do you? And it's like, yeah, it helped him. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I can't be Joe. I want to be Shaun. Yeah. And that's what I've been trying to figure out as I go along. I want to be Shaun Newman. I don't want to be Joe Rogan. Sure, I want to do things similar to him. And so the pushback, it's a muscle. It's getting comfortable with being like, my guest isn't going to hate me if I say this, right? After the Ron McLean episode, you have to understand, I was like, maybe Ron will never talk to me again. Even though I know Western Canada hates him, I highly respect Ron for his career and what he's done. Yeah. And he texted me the other day, and, you know, it didn't faze him one bit. He dealt with Don Cherry for majority of his career. Yeah. Believe me, disagreements is a good thing. Yeah. But the uncomfortableness that comes with it is tough. The big guess going to small guess is like, I want to be interested. If I'm not interested, what the hell? Like, Grant Fear is a great name, but it was a terrible interview. And hey, Grant, if you listen to this, it's no knock on you. You just sucked as an interview. You didn't give me anything. And then you'll get like Paul Bissonnette. It was a fantastic interview, and I'd love to get him again. But like, I want to go where the story is. And the story during COVID wasn't with Wayne Gretzky. It was with Peter McCullough and Dr. Roger Hodgkinson and Eric Payne and Dan Bulford and all these people who were speaking out and getting silence for it. And that's where the podcast took me. And to me, I want to go where I want to go. And chances are where I want to go, lots of people want to come with because they're thinking, I'm not all the population. No one person represents all the population, but I represent a part of it. People think like me. I think there's people that think like Von Dubs, right? Like, oh yeah, that was it. That was interesting, right? Mm-hmm. Now, do I want to have the 1 million followers tomorrow? I don't know. Like I don't know. Like it's such like, do you want to be rich and famous? I don't know. Do you
think so?
Like
you think so, but you don't know.
You don't know, right? Like I do you want to be rich and famous?
You ask me.
And when I say rich and famous, there's different levels. Mm-hmm. There is Kim Kardashian. There is probably, I don't know, Joe Rogan. And then there's probably Brett Weinstein. Yeah. I don't know. You get the point.
I know what you're saying.
Kim Kardashian, I don't think she can walk anywhere on the planet and people don't know who she is. It's kind of like Michael Jordan or, you know, LeBron James.
Yeah. I think I would have to answer yes to that, but not for the actual the riches and the fame. And we had that bit of this discussion on the last podcast too. It's the things that I want are a byproduct of that. And I'm going to have to, if that is what I want, and I've sat and meditated on this, you have to be okay with those things coming with it. I'm a pretty like introverted guy. Like the thought of ever getting to a point where I'm recognized, like that sounds kind of scary and kind of, you know, not great, but it's a different thing. And this is also by listening to podcasts, you get to listen to people that got famous different ways. Fame is not one size fits all.
And it's not all
it's cracked up to be. But there's very different to be famous like a Kim Kardashian where you're famous for being famous. Other things too, right? And she's accomplished. I think it's easy. Again, it's one of those free kicks to take a kick at the Kardashian. They do amazing. They're amazing business people. They do amazing things. But on the whole, she has built a persona that she's known for and that people are excited to see the persona she made. They're not all that excited. And maybe there's a certain degree, no, because it's all pretty fake. The way
it's all really fake.
The way people are excited to see Kim Kardashian are going to be so different than the way people are excited to see Lex Fridman. You know what I mean?
But I feel, maybe I'm wrong on this. See, Lex Fridman to me is like Brett Weinstein. Mm-hmm. Lex Fridman walks down the street in Edmonton. Don't get me wrong. People will know who he is.
Depends if he's in a suit or not.
But I don't think he gets bombarded. And I certainly, like, it's like Paul Bissonnette a little bit. And now it might be a little different. Mm-hmm. But he isn't even, like, Michael Jordan and Paul Bissonnette are, like, in two different absolute stadiums. It's not even in the same league. Yeah. Right? Like, one of the nice things about being podcast famous is, and I should not put myself in podcast famous.
I know you're not. I know you're trying to make a point.
But one of the things that I find really cool, I was at the casino the other night. Yeah. Okay? Went out for a couple drinks, and then we went to the casino. And I'm sitting there talking to my buddy, and a woman walks by, stops, and goes, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "What? Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Shaun Newman." or I'm Shaun Newman or whatever. And she goes, that's where I get it. Didn't recognize your face, but know that voice. Yeah. And then it happened again. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, right? Yeah. If I don't talk, nobody knows who the hell I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't
now you just got to learn to shut up.
That's what I don't mind.
Yeah.
That to me, that like, oh, I could handle being where you make money, a living, get to talk about things, but don't have to have all the other jazz that goes with it, right? Like, but like fame usually comes with like people trying to find you doing bad and trying to stir up all this stuff that I don't want any of that. I just want to talk to people, and I want it to be fun, and I want it to be interesting for the listener, and I want the listeners to want to come along for the ride, and I want to grow as a human being.
Exactly. And I think that's where it comes, like, as long as I can be proud, I would take all the riches and fame that will come my way in life. So I want to think about this for a second. I want to make sure I get this right, but yeah, I would take whatever level I get to. Like, I don't need any level. I'm not shooting for any level. That would come with being proud of how I got there. And this ties into this idea of that conversation we had and what all the frustration I was feeling at not being able to convey, because this is kind of the idea that I felt like I failed to convey to you in our second episode we did together of this, when we were saying, like, why not just be that bulldog and go about, like, bug Lex Friedman. If Lex Friedman's your guy, bug him every fucking day, right? Like, just getting his emails, getting everything. It's like, okay, then I get him on, or maybe I just fail at it. And then naturally, like, I believe in how I'm going to go about it, and I'm going to do it my way, where it's just that become undeniable. It's not going to be because, Lex Friedman's going to come on my podcast because it's undeniably a good thing and he wants to come on, right? Like, and I know that holds me back in certain ways, but at the end of the day, whatever level I achieve, I know I could get to higher levels quicker, but it means something to me that I have to do it the right way, and it has to be earned. And then all the fame that comes with it is going to be the right way. And those people that come up to you on the street, they're going to come up to you because they've connected with that, and that I can be proud of every interaction. Every interaction is never going to be completely positive. You're always going to have the wing nuts and the haters and all that. But on the whole, the ratio of good to bad is going to be so much different than somebody that's famous for acting or anything like that, because it's truly who you are. The being on the mic and being off the mic is the exact same thing. And I need to work on a bunch of skills of being a podcaster. That pushing back, like you said, that is a skill. And I thought I'd be a lot better at it than I am. And then I get on the mic and I'm so thankful that someone's here, and I just don't do it. And it kills me to no end. Not interrupting, being a good listener. Those are all skills. But what I know that I have, that I've always had, and I knew was going to set me apart, and this is what I'm betting on, is why I quit a pretty crazy job that and a lot of people did look at me kind of like crazy. It's because I know that I'm going to be proud of how I got there, and I'm going to do it the right way at the end of the day.
What I respect is you want my way doesn't have to be your way.
Of course.
So my way is being a bit of a bulldog.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, and honestly, when I see it, I wish I could do it.
But in saying that, what you're saying is, I respect that you're like, I know what I want. That's how I think on a lot of things. Yeah. Listen, I know what I want.
Yeah.
You can try and tell me that all I should do is hockey.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So stop telling me that. I want to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Shaun Newman podcast. And if it goes down in a tail fire of smoke,
tailspin.
Thank you. I don't know. I don't know what I'm
Whatever.
throwing out there.
I know what you're saying.
If it goes down, it'll be because Shaun Newman put it down, not because somebody else was trying to guide it, and so for me, you call it, like, I don't really think of it as bulldogging. I just, for me, I go, it happened. I do it to people on a very much lower state. And I really apologize to people, but somebody will email me and I'll read it and I go, that's the thing. I got to think about that. Then I'll forget all about it and I'll move on. And if they don't email me again,
it's gone.
Then it's gone.
Gone forever.
And for certain people, I'm kind of like hesitant. I'm like, I don't know. Do I want to do that? And then the more they email, I'm like, wow, they're really motivated.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about that. And that's how Tim McAuliffe happens.
Yeah.
Like, obviously he was on Tim and Sid, and now Tim and Friends.
Yeah.
And once again, I call it ghosting. I have no idea. He's probably so busy, right?
Yeah.
But right now he's not responding. And I'm like, but don't be hurt by that. For all I know, he's got COVID. He's on holidays. He's on everything. For me, I have to take the emotion out of it and just be like, they're busy and I'm going to keep messaging.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're going to hit on like a guy like, I bring up Ron McLean lots, and I know lots of people just absolutely hate him. And I honestly, I don't love how him and Don's relationship ended. Yeah. But the cool thing is,
conversation last night.
If I text Ron right now, he texts back in 30 seconds. I just like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of it was being a bulldog and going about it. Part of it was pushing back in our first episode. I didn't even think I was pushing back. Yeah. It just, part of it is being you, and some people you're going to hit with and other people you're not going to hit with, right? Like, and that's just part of bulldog, part of just like taking Keith Morrison, the guy from Dateline. Like when he came on, that took 6 months of emailing.
Yeah.
I was so frustrated with NBC by the end that the interview was great, but the process to get there, I almost want to smack my head off.
Yeah.
But then you start listening to like Cabby Richards when he gets Michael Jordan for like 30 seconds on the golf course, or going and interviewing Will Ferrell and stuff. And I learned a valuable thing, I think, which is you think Tim and Friends right now, right? You think they just have a guest list of 5,000 people, and when they email, they get them. But they want guys like Tom Brady, and they have to go through the same rabbit holes. Our level is just different, right? For us, Tim and Sid are that level. For them, it could be Tom Brady, it could be Connor McDavid, it could be all these people. They are on a different level.
Yeah.
And every news show, sports, podcast, you don't think Joe Rogan's got that problem? He does have that problem. He's just got more clout. But he's got people he's trying to get, and he's like, okay, how do we get them? Now, when Joe Rogan's email comes across, I'm sure a lot of people are like, holy crap, you're never going to believe this. But there's going to be tons of people that Lex Friedman is trying to get on and either doesn't know about or can't get a hold of right at the start. And I think that's a lesson I've continually trying to remind myself of when I'm trying to get guests on, is everybody's in the same rat race when it comes to trying to get good podcasts. But I try and listen. One of the things I hope we do better of in this area is we can network the shit out of it, right? Yeah. Like you really love Ken Rutherford, you know?
Yeah.
You made one text. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll give you Ken's number. Yeah. He's a great guy, and I think he'd be great to have on your podcast, right?
And I don't do it, but like I'd say 50% of the guests you've had on, I don't want to bug you, but I'm like, fuck, I'd like to have that person on too. Like that person. Like, I don't want to.
Here's the question for you though, because I understand what the trepidation of like bugging me and vice versa and everything. But if Von Dubs goes to number 1 on the charts, does that do Shaun Newman better or worse?
Better. Yes, it
does. If Shaun Newman became Joe Rogan, does that do you better or worse?
Better.
Like immediately, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, a guy's got to remind himself that. I'm talking me right now.
Right.
Because I have the same like, no, you just email him and this is how it goes. When you could just be like, but if you lend a helping hand and put it together for him, you don't know where that fruit bears. Because that could bloom into... Well, for me right now, Jordan Peterson, wherever you're at, like I'm ready to drive to Florida and go kick down his door and be 100%. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
That might get me hauled off to jail.
Yeah. I have so many things on that. And this is getting dangerously close to the same conversation we had in the second episode where I wasn't able to convey to you exactly where I was coming from. So I'm going to take another attempt.
Take another crack at it.
So you talked about there of being able to take the emotion out of it, and when you get ghosted or whatever word I
ghosted, because I get ghosted all the time.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think they're doing.
And that's where I really there's a girl that I went to university with. She was in Lister Hall in the same residence, and she does music, and she's amazing, so talented, right? And is now, having some amazing success. I think she's in the States touring it now. She's doing awesome, just makes great music, and I'm a big fan. I reached out to her once and just got ghosted, and I would love to be able to do what you said, where you just take them out, oh, they're probably just busy or didn't see it, or maybe they don't control their social media. Where my head goes is, oh my God, she thought I'm a creep, like she thinks I'm trying to hit on her, like I'm just never gonna take another attempt, like I'm just dead to, I hope I never run into her, I hope this never happens, right? Like, and that's with every female I reach out to. That's my worry. And if it's a guy I reach out to and get ghosted, oh, like fuck, they think I'm some idiot. Like I not only can I not separate the emotion out of it, is I have so much I'm such an emotional guy that so much gets added into it that the thought of getting ghosted and going back and like it just makes me almost physically sick to my stomach. Like I can't even, it is so, and I think so much of this podcast is trying to be genuinely me and not trying to be someone I'm not, right? Which is same, and that's the same with you. That's one, you know, where I say we have such similar journeys, but we're also very different guys, right? Like in certain ways. And that's where I prefer to be honest about that. And I know I need to work on that. And there's a middle ground between what I just described to you and where you are. There's some sort of healthy medium there where I get a little bit more bulldog in my game, but I'm still true to who I am, and I'm not gonna just all of a sudden turn into that absolute, you know, bulldog is the wrong word, but that's just kind of what we're using to keep the conversation with, right? To turn into that would be disingenuous as well. And I know that, but I know as well that that's an excuse at a certain point, right? There's some middle ground there where to one side of it is, I know that is an excuse and that it is true and that's not who I am, but it's holding me back. And there's one side, and then there's that sweet middle spot, and then there's kind of where I'm sitting now, which is too far to the other side, where I'm too emotional over it, too unwilling to take those leaps. And then on top of that is the things like being scared to reach out to you and ask, like, you know, so many of the guests you have on are so up my alley, and I listen to the episode, like, fuck, this guy is, you know, and oh, he's just down the road. I could do a trip to Lloyd. I mean, I plan on doing a lot more trips to Lloyd soon anyway to have more conversations with you and stuff, but I feel like that's something that's earned. I feel like I'll get there. Whereas in my head, the first step would be, you know, well, if Shaun wants to help me out like that, he's got a show too. And I would never ask to be on. You brought it up earlier, but I'd never ask that of you, right? And even so much as I would never ask a guest, and I know this really holds me back, as I have a guest on, I would never ask them to repost. Like when I had you on both times, right? I probably should ask, hey, could you put that out and you got it, you know, bigger following than mine. Could you blast it out? I didn't ask you, right? And I didn't,
But the thing is, and I'm terrible for that too. Yeah. The thing is half the time, I just was on the Canadian Story podcast.
Okay.
And they didn't even tag me in the post, so I had no idea it happened. Right. I literally had zero idea, and I am not a social media guy, which means I'm not on there all the time looking.
Right. So
then they text me and they said, "Hey, could you post it?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't even see it." I'm like, "Oh, could you tag me in it?" Oh, right. Yeah, you're on social. Yeah. So then they tag you, because then at least you get a notification. And and so much of it is like, yeah, there are jackasses out there. Yeah, I've ran into a few of them. But for most of it, I'm like, I don't know. Do I care what Paul Bissonnette really thinks of me? Nah. I was a cool interview, and if I ever get him again, great. But if I don't get him, I still had him, and I'm going to move on with life.
Yeah.
And lots of people, I'll put myself in the perspective. When people reach out, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I'm doing something of worth that they want to interview me.
Yeah.
And so for you, I come probably right back to where I was the last time we were, minus the 3 beers in, is that I don't know what you got to do about that. I mean, I have no idea. But to me, all the fear that you're putting around it is irrelevant. It's not even real, because
it's all in your own head.
Yeah, because for a woman, you're actually trying to empower their voice. They should be over the moon about it, right?
Yeah, and I know it's ridiculous.
And I tell you what, on the podcast lately, I've had like a ton of women come on. You know, I chuckled at myself in the first like 100. I had like 2 women. I'm like, geez, I'm only a little biased here. But like the last stretch, women have been absolutely kicking it around. Like they've been pushing the pedal to the metal, because I've had some ladies on that got some stories that are like interesting thought perspectives, and they're killing it right now.
Yeah. No, and it's funny you bring that up, and I think we probably did talk about this too. Of when somebody reaches out to me and wants to be on the pod, like there's nothing greater, and that's where. And it's funny because this discussion has been had around the Von Walkerberg dinner table, right? Like, because, you know, I talked to my dad about this stuff, and, you know, when I had you on, like, first person I texted when I found you on Instagram, I texted my dad, oh, there's a guy in Lloyd that does a pod, right? Excited about it. Oh, and his response, oh, maybe I'll have you on. I said, yeah, I'm never going to ask, right? And he knows that. He knows who I am. But he goes, why don't you ask? And I...
Road trip to Lloyd, come down.
Hell yeah. Oh, all about it. There's so many things on the list of road trip down to Lloyd. There's 2 twin brothers, the Haygarth brothers that started a...
Can I hop in there for a second?
Of course you can. You're the guest, baby.
Yeah, well, so you go like, why don't you reciprocate? And I go, I had a stretch there where it was like Peter McCullough, Paul Alexander, but you get the list. And I was like, I don't know how to stick in anyone who isn't in that realm right now. You get too caught up in if you go off the course.
Yeah.
That one, no different than when I said Paul Bissonnette isn't all of a sudden going to make you a superstar. Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter who guessed, isn't all of a sudden going to ruin your steam. Because one podcast, and I don't mean to say you wouldn't come on and blow it out of the water, but I go back to... Which I would,
of course.
Of course. When you came down the last time, I seriously considered it. But what overtook me was I don't have time to deviate from the course. And the course is Brian Peckford, Paul Alexander, Peter McCullough for a second time. And I was planning out that because I wanted the answer. Mm-hmm. I want the answer. Yeah. And these are the people that I believed could give me the answer. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was right or wrong, but that was where my brain is at. No, you come to Lloyd, we'll put you on.
Oh, for sure. And I understood that at that point. And that would be my response to Ingo. And then I had John second time, and Ingo's losing his mind because why are you not asking? I'm just like, he's busy. He's got this stuff going on too. And definitely could see you were getting into that that COVID world very deep and looking for that answer. And what was frustrating to me, I guess, which is completely not on you. This is all in my head, like most of this stuff is. But I was listening to you have these conversations with these people like Peter McCullough, which I've been so far down the rabbit hole with these guys that I see you learning on the fly and having conversations where I'm talking with my hands here, so I'll have to maybe paint a picture to people listening. Like, you're over here on the left side, or most of society is over here all the way on the left side, where your amount of knowledge other than the mainstream things you're being given is very little. And then you are pushed all the way over, you're almost to the middle of this thing I'm going to eventually. Yeah. And then all the way over to the right is these Peter McCulloughs and all these people that you're having on it. Every time I can see you being sucked further and further over to that, getting more and more knowledge.
Can I talk to that for a second?
Of course.
I would say I was further over to where they are. The difference was I was having 8 conversations a week. Only 2 of them were being recorded. And one of the things I went is I can't jump all the way to where Peter is because I'll lose half my audience.
The audience.
And the crazy thing is right now, 2 months of I'm podcasting, what I've found is my audience is now at times further than me. Yeah. Because I took 2 months off and turned off turned off everything. Yeah. And I found the reason people call it slow playing it. Ken calls it being, like dumb smart, right?
Yeah.
Where you
Rogan's the master of it.
Like where but the thing is, if your audience can't understand what the hell you're talking about, there's no point in having Peter McCullough on. So you play the hand that, I got to ask some questions. There's a couple things that I don't know. Yeah. But, and you kind of inch your way to it. So if you're following along, you get to follow along and slowly grow. Whereas if you do, and you imagine, you listen to how many podcasts, right? Yeah. Thousands or hundreds of hours, right? Yeah. The majority of people don't do that. They listen to Von Dubs and they listen to one other and that's
Chicklets or Rogan or
and so if all of a sudden you start talking about some theory, you can lose people. Mm-hmm. Because I've lost lots of people. Joe Rogan, when I first started listening to him, I hopped in at like episode, 700. I'm just going to throw out a number. I have no idea. And he would say things, and I'd have to pause the podcast for 20 minutes and go research it. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to say that I'm a special case, and maybe there's more like me than I give credit. Yeah. There's a ton of people that are the opposite way. Like, after an hour of not understanding anything, they'd be like, fuck, I'm out. Like, I just can't do this. They're talking all these, like, weird things, and this happened and that happened. I've never even heard of this before, and what am I going to do? Like, I didn't want to read a book. I wanted to listen to a podcast. Yeah. And so I hope what I was doing at that time was I was easing everybody closer and closer. And I became firmer and firmer because I don't need to rehash this argument because I've already had this person on. And now my audience knows and I know, and we get closer and closer. Yeah. It was a fun little ride to go on.
I would imagine, right? It was fun to follow, right? Like, and it was fun to follow, and I could definitely, as somebody that was pretty knowledgeable, like I was a lot closer to the Peter McCullough than I was the other side of that, little thing that picture we painted, and I could see you doing that, and I appreciated that, and I, that's what I was watching in front of my eyes was you growing as a podcaster, where I felt like you were learning huge lessons and getting better each interview. You could see you getting better with that, and I guess I don't know. I think this is every way I'm trying to frame this in my mind just sounds really awful and egotistical of me, which is half the things I talk about on this. But like, in the same way that like the Tanner Boser interview was honestly one of Tanner Bozer's best interviews because of the reason that you didn't know it, because Tanner Bozer is a guy who is not super happy with the media he has to do and he doesn't really want to do it. And it was so refreshing for him. I think what I got out of the interview was it was refreshing just to have a guy that is just interesting, wanted to ask some questions, right? And he really opened up to that because he's I don't have to be on my toes and answer some really, high pressure technical questions, right? This is just, I'm just having a bullshit with a guy, right? And in the same way that was amazing, and I thought that brought out specifically for Tanner, as an MMA fan, there's a bit of frustration there too.
I don't doubt that.
Right? Yeah.
Listen, I will never stray away from a conversation.
Yeah.
That, like, you want to give me one of the top players in the cricket league?
Yeah.
I'm going to sit down with them. But if you're a cricket fan, you're going to hate it. Mm-hmm. Because literally I know jack shit about cricket.
Right.
UFC, I certainly know more than nothing.
Yeah.
But not much more.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I enjoy the big prize fights.
Yeah.
But to sit there and act like I knew exactly who Bozer was going to come, because I got absolutely grilled after that one. I'm like, geez, here I am getting Tanner Bozer. I think it's a cool thing, and I got just lambasted for it. And I'm like, oh, well, whatever. I mean, people had fun with it and whatever.
Exactly.
It didn't hurt my feelings.
And like I said, even though I felt on the flip side of it, it was one of the most opened up I've ever seen Tanner Bozer in any interview ever. So like,
that's pretty cool.
Really cool. And I thought that was, I learned so much from listening to that episode. Like, I would have never guessed that, right? And I think that's probably a piece of just a learning, and I think that's also just a piece of who Tanner is and how he reacts to media and stuff. And everything else I'd seen of him, he kind of keeps a certain persona on, almost like the NHL players where, Connor McDavid, there's no way when you meet him for a few beers at his place or something, there's no way he talks like he does in front of the microphone at media availabilities, right?
No. That's they get training in that.
Exactly.
Right?
And I'm sure Tanner, I don't know if he's ever done training for it, but like he has a certain way that he talks in certain interviews, and that definitely was broken through with you, right?
Yeah.
Going down a different bit of a rabbit hole, but like just the little bit of frustration that I felt as an MMA fan with some of the questions and stuff. I feel like there's also some of that too, where it's like, man, the conversation that because I got to listen to you have Peter McCullough, all these really, because no matter how far over and how close on that side of this thing I'm to Peter McCullough, there's still a very vast, and wherever I am in between that, still so vast. But just being that little bit closer to them, that little bit of understanding, I could see where you're, in the same way I said, like listening to so many hours of Joe Rogan, you see where the blind spots are. It's like, I could see early on where your blind spots are. And I felt like, man, if me and you could sit down for 2 hours and talk about, I could just shore up a couple of different places that every next episode with the Peter McCullough would have been so much better. You would still have to.
You know what you sound like? You sound like Ken. And Ken's probably listening to this, and that's what.
I fucking love Ken.
Well, I mean, like between like there's a group of people who listen to me.
Yeah.
That say that pretty much verbatim what you just said. I'm like, boy, I'm trying here.
I know exactly, and that's where you feel so bad. That's where I feel bad even bringing that up, because I get.
No, don't feel bad.
And I know how gosh damn hard this thing is. Going into it, I'd listen to so many people do it and do it well, right? Like watching Lex Friedman start from one and listen to it right from the start and watch him grow with it, but to be so good right away, I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll be that good right away. And then you get that awakening of, well, this is way harder than they make it look. There's a lot more skills to this thing, and you got to do it. But then to try and explain to other people, and that's why I love talking to you, because you get it. But like, man, this looks so easy to people.
Well, the other thing is if your guest doesn't play ball, it's a tennis match, right? I go back to Grant Fuhr. I was excited for Grant Fuhr, and then, like 5 minutes before, this is how like I was just trying to like jam as much information in my brain as possible. 5 minutes before, I'm reading an article done where Ron McLean is quoted as, the toughest interview I've ever had is Grant Fuhr, and I went, well, I'm glad I did so much research, because I literally, my brothers laughed at me. It was like 1,000 questions for an hour and 20-minute interview, and they said it was like paint drying. Yeah. Like it was painful. Not because of me, because Grant was just like, yep. I'm like, you won a Stanley Cup with Wayne Gretzky and them. How was that?
Good.
And you're like, so a lot of podcasting is creating a safe space where they feel comfortable to open up and talk. Because if you don't have somebody willing to talk on the end of the mic, you're literally talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when you have guests on over and over and over again, that's what it is. Yeah. That's what you need. You need them to play ball, because if they don't play ball, you got nothing. Yeah. And Joe does a fantastic about it. Howard Stern's a guy that does a fantastic job of getting awkward things out and his guests being willing to talk about it and just open up. Like, I mean, Howard Stern might be the godfather of radio.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're going to talk about some serious matters, saying it to millions and millions of people, maybe not the greatest thing, right? But him, Joe Rogan, those two guys just find a way to do it. And that's a skill. It takes talent. It takes working at it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What episode are you on?
I've done about 140 of the TheVonDubCast, and I've done, I think, 11 of the Oilers Uncensored. And then of that 140, probably 10 to 15 of those are those solo ones where I just...
But so in total, like 150, 160.
Roughly, yeah.
And I would say, you know, in my first 100, if I go back and listen to Ron McLean, I go, oh, there's some things I would have done differently. Yeah. And then if you go to Glenn Sather, which was 200, I hear some of the things in that, and I'm like, oh, that was better, but, you know. Yeah. And I think I'm at Friday's 274, and then you got almost 40 more archives. So you're over 300. And I just go, all I can think of in my head is, it's a process. What will that process look like at 1,000? Because I don't plan on stopping. Yeah. And I go, so much better. But you got to put the work in. It's like being in the gym or whatever else. I know the terrible analogies of what it's like, but that is what it's like. Yeah. And just like going back through it and understanding I need to get better at this, I need to get better at this, I need to do a little more deep dive into that. I got to, you know, have Von Dub on to kick me around. Sure. Like to me at this point, I'm like, I'm creating something, but no one episode, no matter how good, how bad, how in between, is going to drastically shift everything. And I say that, and I kind of laugh in my head as I say it, because Roger Hodgkinson definitely changed the trajectory. And I know there's people that don't like him, and that's fine. What he said really, 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 really impacted me and really changed the trajectory of where I was heading. So, like, I don't know. I'm open to having anyone that has an interesting story. I think you have an interesting story. The fact you're still doing the TheVonDubCast, you're better than, I think we're both better than, like, I forget what the percentage is of people that quit after their first, like, 5 episodes, and I know a ton of them. Yeah. And so, like, no, we both got to keep going, because who knows where this leads. I have zero idea. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because everyone, when you have a podcast, everyone wants to bring up that idea of, oh, there's 10 million podcasts. I can't remember the actual number, but there's something like, Joe Rogan talks about it a lot. Like every couple months it'll come up of how many podcasts are out there, and he pulls up this number and they look it up, and it's about, like, for easy numbers, let's call it 10 million. And I've had people actually go in and debunk this. So now you go in and you say, how many podcasts have lasted more than 3 months? And that number drops significantly to, like, under 1 million. It's like, oh, it's like starting a business. You know, they talk about, like, most businesses don't make it past. I think it's like year 3. Yeah, I think it's something like that. I think it's podcast. I think it's only like, it's a low number that make it past their first 7 episodes. Exactly. I remember 7 episodes is a big thing. Why? Because I remember having the youthful exuberance, acting like I was like 20 when I started. I was like, oh, I'm starting a podcast. And then you realize how much work it is, and you're like, okay, do I enjoy this or don't I? Because now this is what it is. And I don't know how many podcasters have come to me or people want to get in. I'm like, here it is. Super easy. And then after the third one, they're like, man, I didn't realize how much work. I'm like, well, I don't feel like it's work. Yeah. Like, I honestly, you ask me, like, you know, congrats on being full time. It's like, I didn't think this was possible. Yeah. And now that I'm here, it's stressful because, you know, now it has to provide, where before it was just a hobby. But I didn't realize I could have this much fun doing something I absolutely love and get paid for it. Yeah. I didn't realize that. And I've followed a ton of people who are like, oh, just follow your dreams. It's going to be good. Yeah. Do this. It's like, okay.
A little more to it.
Yeah.
Hey, Mohammed, how long have you been going for? I did realize an issue with the setup is I don't have a timer going. I just want to see how much, because I'd love to talk. Yeah, that'd be good for next time. 2 hours and 52. So we're almost done 3 hours. I probably should let you get back home on the road, but I definitely wanted to talk a little bit. Maybe just quickly we can bump onto it about
we put Muhammad into a sleep a couple times. Eh?
Yeah. All right. So
he's like, what did I get myself into?
Exactly.
FYI, it's cool having you sit over there. I don't mind having him chime in at times too.
Exactly.
That's a cool feeling.
It's nice, and that's why I said, chime in as much as you want. You ever want to chime in, I'm never gonna stop you. We'll learn how it goes. You'll get the reception. That's part of putting yourself out there. Is people react how they react, and if they like it, you like it, and then you adjust and get better. Just like
everything else.
Just like we have to learn to get better. Yeah.
Anyways,
it's awesome. So the decision to go on your own. In the last podcast, we were both at that point where we both really wanted to. We were both probably, if we're honest with each other, a little bit scared of it because it's intimidating.
I'm still scared.
I'm still scared too. Yeah, it's that's part of it. So there's a little bit of fear there. There's some realities. Much different situation for me versus you. You have a family. You have a lot more things at stake. How has it been so far? What were the big key factors because I know the factors that were holding you back from, but what were the realities that changed that allowed you to do that? How much have you regretted at any point? How has the process been?
There's been never a regret.
Didn't think so.
I had a number in my head that if my wife and I sat down and we're like, if you get to X.
Was that downloads, dollars?
Dollars.
Gotcha.
Yeah. If you hit that amount, it has to become a serious conversation. Yeah. And before Christmas, I hit that number and I was like, I didn't even know what to say. So the scariest, most surreal day was walking into my bosses. You talk about having a job. Mm-hmm. I had a job in the oil field that I loved. I was very good at, got paid very well, compensation, everything, like truck, gas. I mean, think about how much expensive fuel is coming here to to Edmonton today. I want to punch myself in the face. Anyways, so like that day was nervous to finally spit it out. But once I did, I've never looked back. Probably the thing that I'm thinking about right now, though, is I've heard, I can't remember who said it. If it's Jordan Peterson or somebody else. It was probably somebody else, but he reset it. But your goals should scare you.
Yeah.
And the goal that scared me was taking the podcast full time. And now that I'm here, I'm looking for a new goal to scare me again.
Any ideas?
Yeah, one of them is one of them I did in March was the SMP Presents, where I had people Lloyd. That was
my next question.
I was fucking terrified of that thing because I said if this bombs, I'm not sure if going full time was the right choice.
As a litmus test.
Yep, and because here's an idea that I'm putting on stage. Charging people money to come see.
And just for people listening, do you want to just maybe break down? I know exactly what you're talking about, and I want to ask you about this.
So in March, I did SMP Presents Solutions for the Future. I brought a doctor, a lawyer, a politician, and a media personality, putting on stage. They each got to speak for 10 minutes right at the start, just kind of like an opening remarks. Yeah. Then there was a break, and they all came back, and we had like a live roundtable podcast where they discussed issues because I wanted to solve things and I wanted different backgrounds to look at problems. And it was very interactive with the audience. There was a meal for the audience and drinks and enjoyed the night. And people showed up, which gave you whew. And the thing that I knew I was on the right was I couldn't tell, but after my wife, my sense of enjoyment is going to listen to 4 people talk for 3 hours. Most people don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
My wife, I would say, would be one of them, but she came to support. And after she said, that was really well done. And I'm like, oh, you enjoyed it? And she's like, actually, I really enjoyed it. And I would say your entire audience enjoyed it. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean? She's like, you could have heard a pin drop. They were so laser focused on what was going on the stage. And after I heard that, I was like, okay, all right. I got people to travel from Calgary, Red Deer, Swift Current to come to Lloydminster for that. So when you talk about ideas that scare the crap out of you, we have an Alberta leadership race coming up. And I'm toying with the idea of getting the leadership candidates to moderate their debate across Alberta. I never thought I'd be a political guy. I think there's a knack for what I'm doing. I think there's people that want it to be done.
For sure.
And I'm really curious on what they have to say. I don't think there's been a more pivotal moment in Alberta history that I can remember. And right now, I think I'm positioned decently well to sit down and do that. That scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And I want things like that because when you stop getting scared by what you want to do, I think you lose a little bit of your edge, right?
Sure.
Now that I'm here and I'm doing it full time, like,
For sure.
like, have I enjoyed not having to drive 5 hours and maybe rested a little bit because it's been hard to get here and come off Ottawa and everything else? Yeah, but I'm ready to, like, well, I drove to Edmonton today. There was a reason. I had a purpose of being here. I want to start pushing again. And that means it's time to start opening up some ideas and seeing where they go, and let's go again. Because, you know, not working full time, I have a lot of hours in the day.
Yeah.
I want to fill those hours again because I don't want to sit around and wait for, 3 podcasts and hang my hat on the door and get to just do nothing all day.
Yeah.
I want to do some things, and I want to push the pedal to the metal. And so, yeah, I think I'm leaning towards there. I got to make sure that they're open to it. Heck, we got to see who the candidates are, one, and when they announce when the actual leadership vote will be. But that's one thing that I'm thinking about, and we'll see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah. That's really exciting. I love those ideas. Got to admit, I've had similar ideas in the past too about that exact idea. As soon as they brought up Rogan moderating a debate in the States, it was kind of like, ooh. Man.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine how amazing it would be to have someone that has the skill set of Joe Rogan? Not to say either of us sitting here talking has that skill set, but to start, even someone that doesn't.
Did you watch the federal conservative debate?
No. In Canada?
Yes.
Not a goddamn chance.
It was fucking brutal.
It's terrible. There's no way it could be good. It is structurally impossible for that to be good. That is why, like, yeah, it'd be amazing to have Rogan do it, but anybody doing it not within that format would be so heads and tails better than that.
So my idea then is to, and I could be wrong, but I have proven it out in Lloyd. Mm-hmm. It would have to be changed. Would you have to fine tune it? Yes. But could you do something similar? I don't see why not. And I don't see
such a low bar to beat too.
And a ridiculously low bar to beat.
It's almost laughably low how low the bar is. Like, you could go in with no planning, no thought put into it, and just stick them in front of it. As long as you don't have the absolute idiocy of the debate stage and and that format they have, nowhere near it, and you just sat down with those two people in an empty room, not even with a Muhammad watching, and just sat with them, you'd get so much better out. There would be so much more for people to chew on and so much better understanding of who those are. They couldn't tap dance within the actual format is designed so that they can tap dance and not show you a goddamn clue of who they are.
100%.
That's exactly how it's designed.
So I'm hoping, like, I could be wrong. Maybe I know people want to listen to it, right?
Yeah,
like,
me too.
If Joe Rogan did Trump and Biden, you don't think that wouldn't have the most downloads ever? Like, it would be crazy and it'd be good.
Yeah.
And here in Alberta, I think we're no different. Right now, whoever announces for Alberta, I'm like, I have no idea who a couple of them are. I can almost guarantee it. I want to put them in front of a mic.
Yeah.
And I want to record it, and I want to have the live audience, sure, and we can go to different towns and get feedback from the audience. And all of a sudden, I'm like, to me, that idea scares the shit out of me, because now you got to be, like, moderator has this really interesting role to play to make sure that it's facilitated in a way that isn't leaning to one person or another, and makes it enjoyable for the audience to listen to. And it's an interesting balance. But I think it's, like you say, it's a low bar. I feel like it is. And I think it's lacking that nobody's done it yet. So I'm, like I say, it's a lofty goal, but I'm waiting for them to announce when the leadership race is going to be. And when they do, I don't even know the hoops I'd have to jump through. But I may just extend an olive branch and see if it's something that they want to do. Because if they do, oh man, I think it'd be a ton of fun.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's an awesome idea. I love that. That's right up my alley for what I think is necessary. That's an accountability system, which is always what I come back to, that would change the game. It doesn't make any actual changes, but it forces accountability so that the change they do make actually have weight, and they don't just get to do whatever they want with no consequences, and it doesn't matter because it's all kind of a rigged game anyway. One other idea, I swear I'll let you get back on the road after this.
It's all good. It's all good.
In our last discussion, another one of these ideas, which we had both kind of had independently and we had a fun discussion on, and we both kind of came to the same spot, was the idea to do a podcast a day for a year. And both of us, at the end of the day, we both discussed how much we loved the idea and how we both want to do it. And both of our answers were, we could do it if we didn't have full-time jobs. And now you sit here, months removed, both not having a full-time job, and neither of us are doing a podcast a day for a year.
Mohammed, you think a podcast a day would you sit in the chair for a podcast a day? You think that's insane?
Is there anything better in the world that doesn't fall under that exact characterization?
You know what's funny about that is I have a group of 3 people that I don't even know what to call it. I'm going to call it a board, just a sounding board of.
Yeah.
And I brought that idea up to him. I said I would really like to do 365 and 365.
Yeah.
And when I said that, they all said nobody's going to listen to it. And I'm like, I don't know, right?
I disagree.
Like, I'm like, will it be impossible for everybody to keep up with? Yes.
Yeah.
Is there going to be certain people that listen to everything? Sure. I'm like, but like right now I'm doing 3 and there's people that are like, it's too much. I can't keep up. And there's other people that, man, I can't wait for you fucking next. Right?
Yeah.
It's just like
do daily.
Daily
Live streams are the name of the game.
If you live streamed it every day.
Live stream a podcast. We could be live streaming this right now the way I have it set up.
Oh, don't worry, it's coming. It's coming.
There you go.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
So the answer is, I don't have an answer yet, like a clear one, but I think about it. That's a guy on my list is Casey Neistat.
Yeah.
He did 365 and 365 YouTube videos. Yep. Now, that's a little bit different than what we're talking about, but I mean, not really, because a podcast in a 365, you could have Sundays where I literally rattle off 20 minutes of whatever the hell I want and carry on, right?
Yeah.
Now, I would have to set parameters and rules and everything like that to make sure that it's, the
accountability is there to be
right.
True to the idea.
But the idea is not lost on me. I'm trying to figure out if that does more for me or if the SMP Presents side of things does more for me. One of the things that I really enjoy was like, I got to do a little public speaking down in Coronation, Alberta, actually Brownfield, and I appreciate the Rodbanks for bringing me out. And I found interacting groups of people in a live audience, I was like, oh, wow. I really enjoyed it. And 2, I got better feedback from that than not every episode I've ever done, but pretty close. Like it was wild. Yeah. And I'm like, so what is better? To put on an event for people to come to, and we are starving for anything that is, you talk about the bar being low. For things that I'm interested in, it's pretty low. So am I better off putting all my energy into that or into a
venture like that?
Or into something that I'm like intrigued by because I don't know if I can do it?
Yeah.
Because 365 and 365 is a tall order. I even wonder, like at the end, would you hate podcasting or would you be so happy to go back to 3 a week or 6 a week or what is the number? Yeah. I don't know. But it's an interesting thought, and I've thought about it. I brought it up, like I say, to a sounding board. I brought it up, and they all laughed at me. Like,
is Kenny on the sounding board?
Yeah,
damn straight he is. That's hey, one member is I can speak for him.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you given it thought?
Well, I've given a lot of thought. Yeah, again, very very similar thought process too. Of just is that the number one thing that could be? I feel like the biggest difference between me and you is kind of where we're at with what you've already been able to establish. And for me, since you are so established that if you went for that, you already have something to build upon, where I feel like for me, that calculation is different because that would be huge, but also just getting a consistent video function and a consistent YouTube video and start doing some clips is probably the biggest thing holding back. And brought on Mohammed, we're going to be doing that. And it's a great feeling these last couple of weeks of actually seeing traction grabbed and starting to get towards those where I'm so far from even, like, if I'm honest with myself, I'm so far from where I need to be to jump into a thing like 365 and 365 that same calculation you make of having other ventures that you're weighing against them, I'm weighing against of like, fuck, I just need to get my ass in gear so I can get to where I can actually have that idea, because I'd be doing myself a real disservice by jumping into that and not having my, the Jordan Peterson, clean your fucking room. My room's not clean yet before I can go, and attack the rest of the house.
And I go, people, you want to get invited on to shows, you need to do crazy things that people want to invite you on for. Does that make, I think that makes sense. Did I say that right?
100%. I get you.
So like going to Ottawa, I didn't go there because of that, but tons of people want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's not, a small portion of the population. You do 365 and 365. I mean, you get to like episode, or look at James Topp walking across Canada right now. The guy's a bloody machine. And I'm like, not everybody's doing that. Yeah. Like that's hardcore. And look at the media attraction that's come from that, because I want to talk. I'm like, oh, let's do it. Like so I get to talk to him from the road while he's walking. I'm like, this is intense. Like that's pretty cool. You do 365 and 365, man. I don't know.
That would open some doors.
I think so. I don't see how it can't.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just like, I just think about my own brain. After like 100 straight, I'd be like, how you feeling?
Yeah.
Because it isn't, the thing is it's 100 straight, but then you got to think now, Shaun's calling you up going, I want you on the show later today. Yeah, sure. So now you're doing 2 a day.
Yeah.
Right? So 365 turns into like
400 and some.
400 and some.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm overstating that, but you get the point.
Yeah, I don't know. And
how many podcasts is the most you ever done in a day?
In a day?
Like how many?
Two. Like two full size 3 hour ones. Like I did two in a day.
In Lloyd.
Just listening back in Lloyd, I did 2 in a day. I did 3 hours with Andrew Mavridis, the fighter, and then I sat down with Tanner and Ken and did 3 hours with them. Yeah. And then me and Ken and his amazing daughter, who I was absolutely blown away. Still can't even believe like the intelligence that came out of her mouth for the age she was mind blowing. And we sat there for an hour and a half and bullshitted after Tanner left. And then that night around the fire, did the same thing. And then sat with Hancock's son Cale and his friends and the younger crew and did same thing for a couple hours. And then me and Jason sit up probably 2 a.m. in that garden shed having beers and doing the same thing. So probably only say, let's call it 6.5 of the hours were recorded.
But it is a little different recording versus just sitting around. 100% it is. I think the most I've done in a week is 8 and 7 days. And that was
a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I know intellectually that would be, but for some reason in my head, even when you're talking about 365, what gets to me, it's not even the, if I knew that, say some magic company comes that can just make wishes happen, and they could say, for the next 365 days, we're going to have a guest for you every day. And you're going to have to go do some shows, about 400, let's call it 400 shows in this year you're going to have to do. And I could show up and I could do those. It's not the conversations that scare it. It's the work to get the conversation and burning myself out on because this fills my cup. I after an episode, there's nothing, no higher, like I doesn't feel like work. It's everything in between the mic starting and the mic ending, right? That is the work. And if you didn't have that, like I could be wrong here. I don't think the conversations to be able to put that would be what burnt me out at all. I think I would ramp up. I think I would lock in. I think I would be better on 325 than I was on episode 2. It'd be everything else that comes with it. That would be what I would question myself being able to handle. And I'd have to sit with the tough questions.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes with you two working together. Because I feel once upon a time back in pre-kid days for me, we went to The Root. Used to be a spot in Lloyd, and it was like this cool like restaurant, like a little hippie-ish, anyways, they had this live music guy come in, and he played a song for no less than probably 12 minutes. And the first part of it was just him strumming a guitar, but he was recording it, and then he played on loop, so that became, and then he'd have to do the same thing with it. And at times I'm like, I'm that guy. Like that's what I do. I literally don't have time to be enough creative or learn how to do things more effective on a computer or whatever, or watch engagement too much or whatever, because I'm just like, I literally gotta find guests, book the guest, research the guest, record the guest, edit the guest, figure all that stuff out, publish it, cut a clip, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I just feel like the one-man band. Yeah. And yet I go, someday maybe I'll have a band that plays with me, and all I have to do is sing. But then I'm going to miss playing the guitar, because I kind of like playing the guitar. I kind of like the one-man band feel. And yet, having Muhammad, Jamie, kicking over there, I'm like, but that's a nice feel to it. It has a little touch to it.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
That's the first. This is a first.
That's a first, eh?
A first for me. Having the I don't know, what is your official title? We got an official title for him yet?
That's a great question, Muhammad. I've been kind of referring to him just as the producer, right? Like, but I mean, I think with how much there is to be done, it's kind of, taking on a whole different, he's IT producer, social media. Yeah. Like when you talk about engagement and insights, he just showed me how to look at insights on Instagram like yesterday, I think, or the day before. I had never looked at that shit, right? Because that's just so not me. Even though I know it's important and I probably should be caring about that, but like to be able to sleep at night, to be able to look at myself in the mirror, I have to keep that sense of who I was, that person that I'm not a social media guy. Like there's certain things I will not
corrupt.
That and it's so frustrating for everyone around me that can see me holding myself back for it, and they don't understand why that there's more to it, and it just looks like laziness a lot of the time. And that's the thing. I also am almost impressively lazy. So like the people around me that are like worrying that I'm being lazy, they have good reason to. I'm not saying that they don't. Like I am that, but also I'm a very valued person. I have things that are uncorruptible and they mean something to me. And then for everyone to try and parse those things out and hold those in clear relief to each other is very hard. And they very much blend together and they get a little gray where, okay, is this laziness or is this principle? Right? And it's easy to play those games with yourself and give yourself excuses when you play that game, right? And that's where I'm always existing in the middle.
I always go, if you gave Shaun Newman $1 million budget right now, would he be on the same playing field as Joe Rogan? And the answer is no.
Right.
I'm not there yet. So although social media is a huge part of it, it's like the grassroots growth that I've had is probably where I need to be. Mm-hmm. Am I missing out on being bigger? Absolutely.
For sure.
But I don't know. That's an interesting question. That's, when we talk guests, I approach my guests a different way than you. And so at times it's like, no, man, just go be a bulldog. Yeah. And I know there's social media people out there hear me say that and go, you're an idiot. You need to be hard on your social media because you want to grow exponentially and you want to do this. You got to monitor what times, blah, blah, blah. And you got to get statistically about that. And the thing is, when you're a one-man band, you have to invest your energy where you won't burn yourself out. And the amount of energy needed to create something big on social media is probably 10 times the energy for me than it is putting it into good content, if that makes sense. Because it's less, I expend less energy on finding people and sitting down talking to them. And, with you having Muhammad, maybe you'll find that you found best of both worlds.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping to do. And it's very much there's so much that I need out of Muhammad that it's almost in a point right now where we're just figuring it out. And like, I'm trying to, every day we're working together, I'm trying to convey more and more of what I need and trying to build that role for him so that he understands what I'm even expecting out of him, because that's a big, complicated question to begin with. Like, yeah, I need him. Like, this role is probably the easiest thing we could have. Okay, when we do the interviews, you got to be there. If we need something Googled, if the mic goes out, that's pretty explained. We kind of knew that going in, but there's so much more behind the scenes. And I really love what you said about the energy expenditure and recognizing where you can or how much it takes out of you or puts into you with these things. And that's where I think that was one of the biggest things I feel like we were just missing each other slightly on the last conversation, was that being a bulldog, I know I can do it, but that is going to take so much, like that
10 times their energy.
That's going to take
just in worry times, and everything else.
Exactly. And it's going to be so that's going to take away from all these other areas. And I know that. And I know that that's not an excuse to not work on that and try to get better at it so it doesn't take that much energy and I get more comfortable with it so at a certain point. And I've gotten better for sure. Like, so do you know who Uncle Hack is? By chance? I think he might be a little bit, but you might have missed him just generationally, because I almost did too. He was
were we talking the
comedian, oil field guy?
Yeah, the Danger Cats. Thank you.
Yes, so you know who Uncle Hack is. So I kind of missed it a little bit. The whole Danger Cats thing, like I would see it on every goddamn truck in Slave Lake, Alberta. I'm sure Lloyd is.
It's a younger, like the age group right below me.
Yeah, and almost like just below me too. Like definitely my age as well, but like it really hit. Like every year below me gets exponentially more and more Danger Cats, let's say. And I kind of missed it. And then I saw it all the time. I saw the Danger Cats. It's like half of Slave Lake has a Danger Cats hoodie. It's huge, right? And I know what this is, right? But then Uncle Hack gets into stand-up comedy. Now it brings it into my room. I'm starting to see him. And then I start, holy man, this guy's really funny. And then one of my best friends in the world, Drew Discover, he messaged me and said, you got to listen to Uncle Hack's podcast. It's really funny. You got to get him on. I listened to it. I listened to probably 4 or 5 episodes, and he's really funny. He does really good, and he's getting better each one. I picked a couple smatterings like you do to see how he gets better. and loved it. And I reached out to him and sent, a really long, because that's how I reach out to people. It's heartfelt. It's why I'd want them on. It's, like, I really appreciate what you're doing. Like, stand-up comedy means a lot to me. Crickets. Ghosted. So I never would have reached out again, But just the other night, getting Muhammad on board, getting a little bit of traction, have a few things, getting the YouTube page caught up. I'm feeling good about myself. And, you get that. And I'm going to shoot my shot. So I hop on that. I had reached out first time on my personal Instagram, and I just hop on the TheVonDubCast, and I just send him, not even as hard, but just like, hey, you know what? Love what you're doing with comedy. Like, there's a Danger Cat sticker on Half a Slave. Like, I think it'd be cool for you to come on the podcast. Would love to do it. I could talk stand-up comedy forever. 2 minutes later, hey, let's do it. And he's coming over tomorrow morning, and we're doing an episode, which is probably like one of the bigger guests I'll have had on, right? And and I'd sat there for all those months where I probably any time in between the first reach out and when he said yes now, I could have done that same thing, and I just didn't. So I know that there is a middle ground there where I need to get better.
But you hit one thing on the head. It's you're in a good mood. I can't tell you how many times when I'm in a good mood, good things happen, and I just get moving. Yeah. I ever told you the Jim Pattison story? Jimmy Pattison, right? Jim Pattison billboards, like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Pattison Ford and all that.
Have I never told you the story?
I feel like you have, because the name sounds very familiar.
So I took a road trip out to Vancouver, and he was one of the crown jewels of. I got to interview him. Yeah. He's like one of the most wealthiest Canadians of all time. He's in his, I think he was 90 when I interviewed him, so he's an old guy. But I got to interview him on a high rise overlooking Vancouver Harbor. And I didn't deserve to be in the building. Like, I literally, my entire outfit wasn't worth one of his shoelaces. Yeah. You get the point. So I'm sitting in Lloyd, and I'm explaining to a buddy that I'm going to take this road trip. This is, 2020. I'm going to take a summer road trip with the podcast, and I'm going to go interview Daryl Sutter and Wade Redden and Corey Cross in Kelowna, and Jordan Tutu in Kelowna, and I got Judy Reeves on the island. She's the one who survived the perfect storm that I talk about. And he goes, the guy you should get is Jimmy Pattison. Or it wasn't that. It was the guy over your shoulder. And I look back, and it's a billboard, and underneath it says Pattison. And I'm like, Pattison? Who is that? And he's like, you don't know who Jimmy Pattison is? And he's like, go look him up. So I look him up, right? And here's this guy who came from Saskatchewan and supports Loose Land and had like the Marilyn Monroe dress brought there for a fundraiser and all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's kind of the way I approach Jordan Peterson sometimes or Wayne Gretzky. Oh, yeah, you want me to get him? How am I going to do that? I'll get right on that. Right. Yeah. And so anyways, I go, this is a Thursday. So I go back home, but now it's in my head. Jimmy Pattison, how am I going to get Jimmy Pattison right now? Whatever. So next day I roll into work. Yeah. I sit down on the computer. This is like 8 a.m. in the morning. And I'm sitting there and I'm typing away, and an hour goes by, and then 2 hours go by, and it's 10 o'clock. And I'm like, how the hell could I get Jimmy Pattison? So I just typed in Pattison advertising or something, right? And this entire thing comes up, and I scroll to the bottom, and there's a media thing, so I click on it. I'm going to send an email. I get halfway through it. I'm like, he's never getting this fucking email, right? Yeah. So I get out of that. I'm like, this is a terrible idea. And then there's a phone number, 1-800 number. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I talk to somebody, they can direct me. Yeah.
Just get me on the right track.
That's right.
Yeah, give me one step ahead.
So I call the number. And for the life of me, I can't remember her name. It's in the book, in his book. I read his book, and it was an interesting story. Anyways, I talked to this lady, and I just explain what I want. I'm like, just trying to get a hold of Jimmy Pattison. I do a podcast. I'm like, very brief. I'm in Saskatchewan, blah, blah, blah. I just like to interview him because he's close to my hometown. And, and she goes, write this email down. And I'm write this email down. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like media. And I'm like, oh, okay. So anyways, I think nothing of it. So I email this at 10 a.m. on a Friday. Mm-hmm. At 2 o'clock on this same Friday, I get a phone call. Hello, is this Shaun Newman? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, I'll put you through to Jimmy Pattison. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And he answers and he goes, yeah, you want to do an interview with me? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And he goes, okay, when do you want to do it? I was like, well, actually, I was hoping I could come to you. He's like, I'm in Vancouver. I'm like, yeah, I realize. You want to drive all the way out here? I said, yeah, if that's okay. You talk to whatever her name is. Yeah. God, I wish I could remember her name. Yeah. Feel bad because I did get to meet her too. Mm-hmm. Anyways, and he just hangs up the phone and it goes back to this. Hello. I'm like, I'm doing a bad impersonation, whatever. Jimmy Pattison says to schedule an interview with you for, I think it was July. And she's like, Jimmy said that? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, you're going to drive all the way from Saskatchewan out to Vancouver. I said, yes. You understand if he doesn't like you, he'll get up and walk out on the interview. I said, that's a chance I'm willing to take. Yeah. I want you to understand that he's walked out on people before. I'm like, I hear you loud and clear. Yeah. Okay, what date? And so she writes it in, sends me an email, and it turns out the lady who answered the phone has been his right-hand lady. She's in a walker when I get in there. That's how, like, Jimmy Pattison, a young guy, since he was, like, she's been with him the entire way, still answering the phones for Jimmy Pattison. And I'm like, so when you talk about Danger Cats, when you talk about anyone, Tanner Boser, it doesn't matter.
He'd be a huge get, and I've reached out to him once, and I've never tried again.
I might be able. I guarantee I can't help with that.
I can too. I'm being a chicken.
But in saying, I just go like, so much of it is like getting in the right mindset and just being like, today I'm gonna find a way. Yeah. Wayne Gretzky is the only one this has not worked on, and Jordan Peterson, once again, I'm throwing out to the universe. I really like Jordan Peterson this year. Yeah. But Wayne Gretzky, I got as close to Glenn Sather and his ex-agent and Kelly Rudy, Theo Fleury, and they all said the same thing. Listen, the thing you got to understand about Wayne is he's literally sat us down at a dinner and said, listen, I know people are going to ask, but the reason you're my friends is you don't let them through. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, that's
all
fair.
the sense in the world.
It does. Yeah. And I'm like, so now I got to corner Wayne Gretzky in a back alley and just be like, I just need you on my podcast. But I mean, shit, Spit and Chicklets just got him on. Yeah. And I'm like, if the mecca of the hockey podcast just got him on, I'm okay. Yeah. Like, I will get him on at some point, or I won't, and the life will move on. Yeah. To me, I really want Jordan Peterson. That's what I want. Yeah. Anyways, that's a long... When you're in the right mind frame, Jimmy Pattison can happen. And Jimmy Pattison isn't Wayne Gretzky. Yeah. But he's not... Like, I mean, the boardroom was like, oh, my God. Yeah. I didn't realize this wealth existed. Yeah. Like, oh, yeah, pretty cool. The security guard at the bottom goes, you're here to see who? And I'm like, Jimmy Pattison. And he's like, what's your name? And he's looking at me like I don't have And he looks, he's like, oh, you're on the list. Okay, away you go. Yeah. I'm like,
I kind of giggles a little bit.
Yeah, pretty much.
What am I in for?
Like, what am I in for? Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, and... I swear, after this, I'll let you go. I swear, I promise you. But you're so on the money about the mind frame, because we talked about this actually in the last podcast we did, was these authors that mean the world to me, not big numbers wise or like, worldwide acclaim, but they've wrote amazing books, and still to this day is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. It almost seems surreal. But I got that in the same way that reaching out to Uncle Hack because I was feeling good about what had been happening with the podcast and this right now. It was the same way. I had a studio set up that I was able to use at the U of A, and I just come off a weekend of doing episodes like this with someone in the chair doing them, and I did some really great episodes. I was just so full of confidence and feeling myself that, you know what, I'm going to reach out to these authors just on a whim, and it just fell into my lap like that.
Confidence is a funny thing.
It sure is.
Right? Like, and I keep asking the universe for Jordan Peterson because some way or shape or form that will happen. Yeah. I don't know how yet. He was literally...
We can make it a race. First guy to get him.
He was literally coming to Regina. Yeah. So I had listeners buy me a ticket to it so I could meet and greet him and be VIP. Yeah. And then it got canceled like 3 days before. Son of a bitch. I was like, universe, you're making this tough.
But he's doing more tours through Canada because I'm in this like Facebook group with a bunch of people that are like diehard Jordan Peterson fans, and actually met some really cool people through it, interviewed a bunch of guests actually from it. And, they're all going to, a bunch of them are all going to see him all over. So he's on tour again. I think he's coming to Canada. Are you going to try that move?
So again? He was supposed to be in Regina and Saskatoon, and he canceled both the shows.
Just recently?
Yes. So like
literally. What about Vancouver? What about Toronto? What if me and you could do a road trip? We couldn't fly, sorry, but we could road trip somewhere.
We could certainly road trip. The Jordan Peterson one is interesting to me because I'm like, he might, in his own right, he is Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. But he's still not Michael Jordan. You know what I mean?
He's Michael Jordan to the right people. To me, he is.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. And so you go like, it's just, I always call, everybody has a lock on themselves or, it needs the right key to open it up. For me and you, it's like a simple text and it's like, you can get to me pretty quick. Yeah. I got zero or little security. Mm-hmm. For Tanner Boser, it's like a hoop to jump through. Yeah. And as you go up, you get to like the smartest safe in the world.
Yeah.
That's Connor McDavid right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That's Jordan Peterson.
For sure.
Just because he's getting hammered with probably so many requests, so much fan mail, so much everything. And he is a controversial guy. Like, I mean, he literally just called the Sports Illustrated chick fat, and Twitter lost the absolute mind. I'm like, well, nobody's getting him for a while. Cause I mean,
that was my exact thought too, of just, you start to get in your head of maybe, because even though I don't reach out, I still fantasize about it. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm not thinking of this stuff. And
I've reached out a lot.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever, I think he's probably one of the guy like Lex Friedman stuff I've done, but no, I've never,
see, like, and the thing is like, it's just getting through the white noise for all of these people, right? Yeah. And
for sure it is.
Like, one of the things that I hope in coming out to Edmonton and actually starting to, I'm going to make a road trip to Calgary, and no different than you going to Lloyd, is once you're in the vicinity of people, I feel like there's a way you can pull a few things off.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Jordan Peterson's going to happen. I got faith that it will happen, because it's like one of those things. I've put it in the universe so much. I go back through my goals, write my goals down. For your listeners, they probably already do this, but like at the start of the year, write out what you want. And even if it's like 10-year plan and you forget about it, I'm always amazed. I'm not saying 90% or 100% of my goals got checked off, but I'm saying a huge chunk of them.
Yeah.
And that's by writing it out. And there's something powerful about doing that. And Jordan Peterson, I don't know, wherever you are, right? Like,
he's listening.
Somehow, some way, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
In this life or the next, I will have Jordan Peterson, because I want to sit and I want to pick his brain on a lot of different things. But who knows? That can be done for all the above and then more.
Yeah. Well, maybe the next time we sit down, you'll have already interviewed Jordan Peterson.
Maybe that'll be. Hey, since the last time we sat and chatted, a lot has happened. So chances are, yes, a lot more will happen.
Yeah, I agree for both of us, and that's exciting. And I'm so overdue for a trip out to Lloyd. It's going to happen. Honestly, what I've been telling the couple people that are waiting on me there is, as soon as the playoffs are done, I'm going to do a full week out there.
When does this get released? Before or after what Edmonton Oiler game?
It might even. I have quite a few in the can. I mean, it was such a good conversation that I might move it up and kind of bump a few people and put it out a little earlier. So it could be as early as next Monday or the following Monday. But
so, do the Oilers beat the Avs?
Hell yeah!
How many games?
6. Wait, let me look at my prediction so I don't cut myself up at the knees here. Nick said 6 games. Yes, 6 games. I still stand by it. And I said it's going to be a split in Colorado. And then we're going to come back. We're going to win both games in Edmonton. We're going to lose the one back in Colorado and win it at home. That was my prediction going in. What are your thoughts after game 1?
Well, I predicted 6 against Calgary, and obviously I was happily surprised it was 5.
Happily surprised, yes.
And I think 7 against Colorado. I think they're in extreme. I'm a defenseman, right? Mm-hmm. And we have arguably my favorite defenseman of all time in Duncan Keith. He's just aged. But when he was in his prime, I never saw a defenseman move their feet quite like he did.
And he has dialed back the clock like I've never seen a player.
He's playing well.
Unbelievably.
But Cale Makar, to me, is Bobby Orr. And I've never seen Bobby Orr play, but I've never seen a defenseman do what he's doing. And to me, when you have a defenseman that can control the game that well, it's going to be scary. But I chuckle about the playoffs. I'm glad we get to the playoffs. The last thing, as you're trying to kick me out here, but now
I'm here all day long.
Now I'm like,
sure I get you home.
But here's the thing: in the East, you have the 2 best goalies, maybe in the playoffs, in Shesterkin and Vasilevsky. In Edmonton, Colorado, listen, Mike Smith has surprised the shit out of me. Yeah. But we lose 8-6, and you go, Colorado ain't getting, Colorado's got to be just as terrified. We've all played enough rec hockey to know if you got a slightly better goaltender, you can win a lot of hockey games that way. Goaltending is huge. And right now, Colorado doesn't get to fall back on great goaltending. I'm not worried about whatever his name is, Francouz. Right? Like, I'm not worried about him. Now, in saying that, knock on wood that he doesn't get super hot and just blow us all out of the water. But, they don't have goaltending that's going to all of a sudden stymie McDavid and Draisaitl where they aren't getting their points. But the Oilers, you're like, I don't know, can Smith, because you're not talking about no offense to all the Flames fans, or maybe offense given, I don't really care.
Fuck
but
'em.
like Gaudreau and Tkachuk were good hockey players. And I know they scored 40 each, and they had the line that scored 40. But they didn't scare me the way McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, even Kadri, like those guys. And then you're not even talking about Makar on the back end. Those guys scare me. And we saw it in game one. I was like, oh, man, this is going to be a fun series. But for once, I wish we had Cale Makar. Like, that defenseman is dynamic on some other level. He's gonna win like 5 Norrises. Like, it's gonna be stupid because you can't not like award that guy for the way he plays. It's just like unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But his entire, like, you remember when before him McKinnon had to like drive the offense, and McKinnon was on like another level, and you're like, man, like they're going somewhere. Well, that's the way McDavid's been through the first 2 rounds. He's on another level, and you're seeing them try and shut him down, and it's frustrating McDavid, I would say. When you have Cale Makar there, it's harder to shut down a defenseman. The reason why is because you're not really that worried about him when he's standing behind the net, but he can expose you with a 40-foot pass, or in Makar's situation, he can turn on the jets and go end-to-end and rip it top shelf and get a goal when it was a clear offside and whatever else. We won't have to go hash with that. But he's the engine of the team now, and it allows McKinnon to have a kind of not go under the radar because it's McKinnon, but you know what I mean? Like all the focus, I think, is on Cale Makar, and it's really hard because, I mean, he's 200 feet from the net. You're not worried about him, and all of a sudden you are worried about him. And he has a way of like cutting passes off and knocking pucks down and making
the way he walks the blue line, the way he makes spin moves off, the way he can open up space and be so deceptive to get wherever he needs to be on the ice from that blue line is honestly where he's most dangerous to me is. And in the same way, once you're cycling and you can open him up that space, you can't cover him because what do you cheat to Makar when he's on the point? No, he's going to get the puck with room to do something because the amount of room he needs and time he needs is so much less than we've ever seen that he is dangerous all the time. It's funny because it sounds almost like you listened to our Oilers Uncensored because this is exactly what we said, right, going into it, and that was exactly our call. And the goaltending thing to me matters even a little bit less too because it's not the goaltending that's the Oilers' issues. It's our ability to break up an offense. When we get hemmed in, this has been an issue for a lot of years. We don't have any of those guys that can get in and break it up and stop the bleeding. And obviously, the end of that is your last line of defense. If you get hemmed in for 3 minutes, but your goalie makes a save, no harm, no foul, right? But now you get hemmed in again and again and again. That's how you stymie the Oilers. You keep them in their own end, right? And that's what everyone says about Colorado too, and that's how you have to play against them. And that's where I think Makar comes in again too, because now the Oilers are one of the best teams in the same way. Like the Oilers' biggest strength against is what their biggest weakness is. When they get teams hemmed in and they start buzzing the offensive zone, and what for a long time would be our detriment was our mentality. And when we'd get down ourselves, we would lose that ability because they'd almost give up and they wouldn't be able to bring games back because they wouldn't.
And now they have the ability to bring anything back.
Exactly. And which is huge to me. But like, you have a player like Cale Makar where when we start doing that thing that is absolutely eating the Oilers up, getting hemmed in and just letting them buzz and get momentum after shift, it's hard to do that against a player like Makar. You can get away from him, get some momentum, but he's going to come back on that ice. And once in a while you can do it. McDavid's line can do it from time to time.
Was it St. Louis that beat Colorado last year? Who beat them in the
second round?
Second round. Was that St. Louis? It had to have been, didn't it?
Maybe. Something is telling me it wasn't St. Louis though.
Because last year was Montreal, Tampa in the finals. So you had the All-Canadian division, which means they played.
So Montreal came out, and who did they play second round?
And what I remember about that series was Cale Makar got exposed for being young, and I would say a little bit timid with bigger men trying to run him the fuck over.
Yeah.
And you have big enough bodies on the Oilers. You can't take blatant runs at him because he's way too fast. But they played, I think it was St. Louis. But I thought Colorado was going to steamroll everybody last year. They had the same freaking team. Like, it's the same team. And they're a year older, and they got by St. Louis. Now, Binnington getting hurt, doesn't get hurt. There's that, it certainly played into it a little bit. But they find a way to exercise their demons and get past
the monkey off the back. Yeah.
St. Louis Blues. But one of the things I remember about last year is people made life extremely difficult on Makar.
Mm-hmm.
And when he wasn't at his best, Colorado suffered. And I'm just like, to me, like, I'm scared of McKinnon. Like, don't get me wrong. He's honestly, last couple playoffs, I thought he was better than McDavid. Like, he was the best player in the playoffs. They couldn't win, though, because he's, once again, just one player.
Mm-hmm.
Cale Makar, you've got to find a way to slow that defense down, because when they're buzzing like that, it all stems from how quickly the defense moved the puck up and catch him in transition. I mean, but the Oilers did the same thing against Calgary. Like, they literally, you're like, what team are we watching here? Like, this is fun. Like, they are catching them everywhere.
And when you can get ahead of the play, you can start that hitting. It's so hard to throw hits like that when you're behind the pace of the play. It is so hard. And when the defense is throwing it up, how are you having time to throw those hits? Or if you do make that decision to throw the hit, you're so left behind by the play that you're almost doing yourself a disservice. You have to match the rate of play to be able to hit like that, and that's what you need to shut them down. But almost, it's a chicken and egg thing. Like, you can't hit them to slow them down enough to be able to hit them. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a really tall task to ask. But what bodes well for the Oilers is they play their best hockey when they do start to hit and when they do start to get rolling like that. And you saw glimpses of it in the game. Honestly, all 3 game ones of this playoffs, we've lost, and I've come out more confident after the loss than I was going into it. I've loved what I saw out of the Oilers every time. I was so sure after game 1 against Calgary that they were going to crumble. Maybe I didn't call the sweep at that point, but I said we've seen what they got, and they are broken. We've already beat them. After game 1, we had not put a win together. That's what I was saying. I don't feel quite that confident going in, but I was so worried about Colorado for so many of those reasons. Then when I saw what we had in game 1, I feel pretty confident the Oilers are still going to win this series. I think yesterday the Oilers were matching them at almost every beat minus 2 players. I think Darnell Nurse had the worst game he's ever had in his career. He looked hurt. He looked like he didn't have a step. He looked like he was just so out to lunch on so many plays, making bad decisions, or maybe even making the right decisions that would he be fully healthy, he could come back from. But just knowing with what you got to give, there's probably 5 goals that were, it's so hard in hockey to put a goal on one person's head because it's such a team game. There's so much going into it. But there's so many times where he was so out of position, and it was on him, where he made a bad gap or made a bad defensive player, just didn't have the hustle.
Beat with speed, beat with
strength. Yeah, like those things. And I am knowing, watching Nurse for this many games over his career, that's not him. But what worries me is that I don't know, what do you do there? Do you try and insulate him? And we've seen the best games out of Nurse has been when Bouchard and Keith play 23 minutes each, and he can play a nice, healthy 16, 17. That's when he plays his best. But when we up the demands on him, it doesn't seem like his body's there to give it to him. Yeah. But he's such a core part of the team that you can't scratch him.
Well, here's the thing. But I'm glad we stuck a little Oilers in at the end of this.
Love it.
The thing is, by the time this airs, this could all be null and void. So you're saying 6, I'm saying 7. Go Oilers, go. Appreciate you bringing me back on.
Hell yeah.
It's been good to see you. And for sure, when you make your way to Lloyd, we'll repay the favor.
Hell yeah. Love it. Well, thanks again. This is always great. I was so happy to get your text yesterday. You're in town, and we'll got to do these a bit more regularly. And actually, I've been meaning to reach out to you. I have a couple more big ideas. I know you're a big idea guy, so I like running them by. I got a couple more big ideas for you too that are better for off the podcast. So we'll be talking lots in the next couple of days, and hopefully people have a lot to look forward to, more than just the next trip to Lloyd that is much overdue. So thanks for coming on. Awesome job.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Shaun.